I'm Peter from the Daily Rios.
I'm Eric from Longbox Review, and this is episode 48 of Peter and Eric's Legion Project podcast. Hello and welcome to the Legion Project podcast. I am your host, Eric.
And I'm your host, Peter.
And Peter and I are here today to discuss issue 48 of the third volume of the Legion of Superheroes, the third part of the conspiracy arc. We'll also spotlight more characters from Who's Who in the Legion and check in on some other Legion-related stuff in the larger DCU at that time. So, you might think of this as we're reaching for the stars in this episode.
Nice.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself there, Peter.
Right. Got to get a Starfinger reference in.
Oh, yes, but not
More,
just that.
But not just that. Yep, sorry. Yep. See, it was even lost on me. Very good. Very good. Very clever. Good for you. Yeah, so we are dipping into comics that were released March of 1988, just to put it all in perspective. And some big things happening this month, some big things that are coming up with the Legion. So not only in comics terms, but in podcasting terms, we're coming up on the big 5-0, right? So is the book. Some big Legion news dropping within the DC universe. I mean, it's all kind of stuff.
I do have to wonder though, Peter, if we're going to make it to when we make it to the end of this volume, will I be the same age as that issue?
God, I hope not. We're close. We only, what? Another 14, 15 issues with annuals,
Oh, yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
If we didn't get distracted or if we didn't do our Tales episodes, another year or two, we'd be there.
That's true. Yeah.
It's funny. I not to peel back the curtain, you don't even know this. So I went back and started listening to the show from episode 1 again. And there's a reason for that, which I'll fill you in, off mic. I was going to save it for a little bit later, but and it's funny to hear us joke and say things like, if we randomly talk about a later Legion storyline, like Superman and the Legion, or the Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning Legion, and usually the joke is, oh, we'll get to it in 5-10 years. Well, the joke really is, twice now I said, oh, we'll get to it in 2028. We're close to 2020.
I know.
Or maybe I even said 2025. I don't even know. But it's like every time I say that, I was like, oh, wow. I didn't know how truthful that would be. All good. All good. It's all for good reason and good fun. So as I teased, there is a Legion thing going on in the DC universe right now. But we're going to save that for the end. Otherwise, we could spend way too much time. And then this episode will be 4 hours long instead of 2 to 3 hours long. So I figure let's burn the conversation so that by the time we get to that, we might be a little more precise and a little more specific. So we're recording this. When are we recording this? This is October 20th. So there are certain things that have been released within the DC universe. We're currently in New York Comic-Con right now. A lot of news coming out of that. So whenever this comes out, all this information will probably be out there. But at least the one information, most people already know about it. So we'll talk about it at the end. We'll give it a few minutes there. So a little tease for the end.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be in the show notes and they'll just jump to the end, right?
This is why I don't do chapters in my my episodes. My episodes. Not I know we do that for the Legion, but
yeah.
It's like if you want to listen to something, you got to listen to the whole thing.
Well, like you said, we do have a lot to cover, so I think we should just jump right in, right? We don't have too much, nothing else for a preamble, so let's do it. Legion of Superheroes issue 48, which was released March 22nd, 1988. Let's start talking some Legion.
March 20. You said March 22nd?
Mm-hmm.
That's my daughter's birthday. So that
Oh,
was 4 years before she was born.
okay.
Is that right? 88? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know, so I
Math.
hope you do. Yeah, math,
Yeah.
math and
She
science.
she doesn't listen to anything that I do.
Oh, there you go.
Alrighty. All right, issue 48, titled A Time to Die by Paul Levitz. Greg LaRocque and Pat Broderick are listed as pencilers. Mike DiCarlo, inker. John Costanza, letterer. Carl Gafford, colorist. Our usual gang. Karen Berger, editor. With another cover by Ken Stacy. So what happens in this issue? Duo Damsel informs co-conspirators Brainiac Five and Saturn Girl of what Tellus told her. She asks them, must we have to become liars now to fulfill our oath? Brainiac 5 also reports that Sensor Girl is on to them, but it may not matter because the device he's been working on is nearly complete. All he needs is a suitable power source, which Mon-El is working to retrieve. In deep space, Mon-El dives into a star to retrieve a white dwarf, the aforementioned power source, and heads back to Earth with it. On Mars, Starfinger wants a status update from his department heads on how to destroy the Legion before they rediscover him and his operations. Armament reports they have a weapon that will kill Legionnaires anywhere they are in the galaxy, but they have no way to attune it to the Legionnaires. Starfinger, out of patience, lashes out with his ring, blasting the ground in front of the armorer, much to his surprise because he's still alive, an event that the Arranger finds interesting. Starfinger tells them to attune the weapon to the metal of the Legion flight rings. The Arranger says he will obtain a sample and he knows just the person for the job. Starfinger promises bonuses if they are successful, or literal termination if they fail. Tellus and Magnetic Kid are discussing the conspiracy when Sensor Girl enters, forms an area in which no one can overhear them, and declares that they must oppose this dark dream of conspiracy. Element Lad sits in the mission monitor room, pondering how the Legion is changing, and it's then that he sees Mon-El arriving at Earth with the White Dwarf star. Mon-El brings the star to Brainy's lab and places it in a receptacle. Having just arrived on Earth, Chameleon Boy breaks into Science Police headquarters in order to use their duplicator machine so that he can make a copy of his ring, but with some impurities to fool Starfinger and the Death Machine. Wow, I just realized there's a lot of machines I'm talking about there. The White Dwarf, despite being in a tesseract that directs some of its energy into a neighboring dimension, proves too unstable for Brainy's machinery, so Mon-El removes it. Before Cam's task is complete, he is discovered by the Science Police. He changes back to his Refage identity and eventually escapes, but without the flight ring copy. Despite that setback, he vows to still take down Starfinger. Outside Legion HQ, Element Lad assists with the disposal of the White Dwarf star, but its instability requires a more direct approach, with Block assisting Mon-El to push it out of Earth's atmosphere. Magnetic Kid and Tellus arrive at the multi-lab, with Kid expressing to the other that this confirms a conspiracy at work. They offer to help, but Brainiac 5 shoos them off. Magnetic Kid pushes back, all but accusing Brainiac 5 of being the heart of the conspiracy, and adding that Saturn Girl is not a usual lab assistant. Brainiac 5 basically tells him that he doesn't have to explain himself. Starfinger expresses his disappointment in Refage's failure to obtain a ring. When the Arranger asks if they should dispose of Refage, Starfinger declares that Refage may yet be of use. He then introduces Refage to the man who perfected the weapon that will kill the Legionnaires, Dr. Hazig. The Doctor then presents Starfinger with the Legion flight ring that he says he teleported out of a Legionnaire's tomb on Shanghala. But Cam recognizes this Doctor as Colossal Boy in disguise. Dun dun dun. That is a great, I have to say, all this Starfinger crap that I've been enduring. This was a great this type of ending. I'm nothing
Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger ending. Yes, what a great cliffhanger for this issue.
It came at me as a surprise Um, because I wasn't sure if I've read this issue before. I think I have. It just doesn't stick with me, right? And I know what is coming from this Starfinger storyline in terms of Chameleon Boy and Colossal Boy. But even I, when I got to that last page and he's talking about the scientist that he got from, where did he say? Takron Galtos or Labyrinth or
Mm,
wherever.
right. Yeah.
And I'm looking at the design of it and I'm going, who is this supposed to be somebody we know from the Legion's past? And then Cam blurts out the secret. I actually went, aha! I made a noise. It got me. It got me. It fooled me. If it fooled my memory of what's going to happen. And also because it's so silly. It's so silly and yet it works. Partly I think because Starfinger is silly, right? So
Hmm.
the way he's portrayed as a villain is very bombastic, you know. So this kind of ending is like, yes, of course, okay. Yeah, so I also thought the ending was quite clever. Do you want me to go general thoughts?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, general thoughts because I'm gonna kind of keep the feeling of this issue. Uh, Chapter 3, as you mentioned, and we're moving somewhere, I think.
Finally.
We're getting some idea of what the conspirators are up to, even if we already had some preconceived notions. Um, the storyline is one of the two storylines is focused on them, not just the Legion with the conspirators in the background. You know, it's the
Hmm.
conspirators right there in the foreground, even if they're not all doing a lot. Um, there was an energy to this. I felt like I was with them along the way and wondering what's going on and getting deep into Monel's thoughts and like, oh, okay. And um, Brainy Brainy's device not working and okay, now where are they going to go with it? The Legionnaires sort of closing in on them, even if there are some missed opportunities here and there. I still felt like, you know, if the story is very wide in the beginning, it's narrowing down.
Hmm.
And Brainy even said that in one of the other issues after that talk with Sensor Girl, where he was saying, you know, suddenly I feel like time is running out. And I felt that way with this issue. Then with the secondary plot with Chameleon Kid, Chameleon Boy, I never get his name right. God, such a bad Legionnaire fan. Um, that storyline, which we more or less just called boring for two issues,
Hmm.
also had some movement. There's a little bit more of like Starfinger's plan. Um, it's a little bit of a return to form with Starfinger from his early days, where with his, you know, people around him, his arranger and his armorer. Like I do like that organizational thing, but the secondary storyline, reading this issue, I finally made a connection to why these two storylines are running concurrently. And because of that, it made me enjoy this issue. I really enjoyed this issue, especially as a third part of what we've been reading, certainly better than the last two parts. Um, it may not have a killer scene like that scene with Brainiac and Sensor Girl, which was just a great scene, and I think it was last issue, right? It may not have like a high stakes scene like that because this issue is very action oriented, movement, you know, things are happening, right? Um, but I quite enjoyed this issue from the cover to the interiors to the notes that I wrote about. I was like, okay, I'm in. Great. Good. It should by this point, please. Because I think we said last time around, if we don't get any movement on this, let's just jump right to 50, right? Like it's like, no, okay, good. All right, okay, I can breathe now. We can do 49, all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those were my thoughts.
It's an interesting, I guess, detail about this storyline is like, it's just the first two issues are like all these different things are just kind of happening and it's contained within an issue, but there's nothing really going on. It's just people talking and
Mhm.
quick scenes back and forth and it didn't feel like like the Universal Project, which I don't know, the every issue. Well, Levitz does he constructs his issue, all of his stories like this. Little pieces of story here and little pieces of story there, all orbiting the main plot or
Hmm.
two
Hmm.
or three, depending on what he's doing. But it felt looking back on it, and I haven't gone back and reread those issues or even listened to our episodes or just what we talked about for those. But thinking about them now, it seems like they had that story was more cohesive, more of a whole with each issue.
Hmm.
Um, but the first two, like you said, the first two parts of this was like it didn't feel like that. This issue, yeah, I felt like, okay, this is really the start of it. Everything else before was preamble to this 5-part conspiracy arc.
Right, right.
So, I quite enjoyed this too. In fact, I think I felt like I was kind of lost in the action, the plot,
Hmm.
the things moving forward. And as I was making my notes, I'm like, I'm not writing a whole lot about what's going on. But part of that is because it's mostly plot oriented, action oriented. But it was also more enjoyable. I didn't feel like I needed to try to make connections when they weren't there, or just nitpick at things, even though I'm going to do that on this issue as well. But I felt better about the story
Yeah.
with this issue. So thank God. And I just hope that the next one isn't a return to form. It's more of this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I feel like um, there are times where an issue just sort of washes over, and because we have such a history with these characters and with the storyline, and we're fighting against what we're reading versus what we know versus what we remember versus what we forgot. There's a lot of ways that we're reading this that's probably not the normal comic book way to read, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're doing it for our podcast, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but it makes for certain allowances, it makes for certain, like, oh, I can see that connection. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not so worried about this or that, or like I did. It just was an enjoyable read. It is also, which I don't know if you saw this in the letter column, it is Greg LaRocque's final issue. Did you know that?
I think I did know that, but I did not see it, yeah, I didn't see it in the letters column. So,
Yeah. So it's in the letter column in this issue itself. Next issue, Pat Broderick will wrap up his stint as our guest artist, which has been helping Greg get us ahead of schedule before leaving in order to give the best possible start to our new artist who debuts in issue 50. The beginning of it. So it's with mixed emotions that we bid farewell to Greg after this issue, as he moves on to the faster pace of The Flash, which we did reference in an earlier episode. So even in that regard, I was kind of paying attention to the artwork and seeing if there was anything interesting going on, and I'm kind of glad that he's ending on this kind of issue than one of the previous issues, because that would
yeah.
have been anticlimactic. Is it sad that he didn't take it to issue 50? Probably. I don't know what he would think of that, but um, so in that regard too, in the art sense, it was nice to have an issue to talk positively about the art in the way that we have
Mm.
with Greg LaRocque, with obviously some conditions. Could things be more imaginative? Sure. Is it as crisp and clean as like a Steve Lytle? No, but this has been Greg LaRocque's book since issue 15, 16, something like that. Um, minus some fill-ins here and there, but he's been fairly consistent, for years on this book.
Yeah. Consistent is probably the best descriptor for,
Yeah.
for Greg LaRocque.
And it's whether you like it or you
Hmm.
don't like it, I mean, at some point, as I think we said before, if you're reading this book and it's been how many years that he's on it, at some point, if you don't like it, then why are you still reading it?
That's true. Yeah.
But, you know, uh, good. Even on the art end, there were a couple things that I was like, okay, that's cool. Um, would love to see certain things pushed even more with like another artist, whether we get that or not, who knows. Or do you have any other thoughts, or do you want to go to the cover?
Let's go to the cover. I'll touch on those things later.
Okay, your thoughts on the cover?
So I really disliked the last issue's cover, right? We
Hmm.
talked about that. Um, and thank God Ken Stacy has returned to form, giving us, I think, a really, again, another visually interesting comic book superhero cover that is striking and enticing. And I can only imagine, because this is showing Brainiac Five, Mon-El, and Saturn Girl, presumably in the lab, and it says "To Catch a Falling Star" on the cover, and Mon-El's presumably holding the white dwarf star, but it's all black and white,
Hmm.
and with the color, the yellow logo stuff on the cover. So I could only imagine this. If I had gone into my local comic shop at this time and saw this on the stands, how different it must have been, how striking, comparatively to other things. So
Right.
it is a simple composition, but the way that it's, the light work on this is just incredible. So I loved it.
Yeah. I would also say the texture.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
We talked about that with the issue 46 as well. You can tell this is, I'm assuming, painted, to some degree, um, or it's using some medium other than what we're used to. Like, um, I love the highlights, like you mentioned, and I just like the mm, the abstractness of it. There's an abstract quality to it. The figures aren't. Could you read a whole comic book like this? Probably not.
Oh
I mean,
no.
unless it was a certain story.
Right.
But I really like that it's a little off in its anatomy and perspective wise. Could the star be a little bit more on the cover? Sure, but it works. It really does work for me. Um, of the three so far, I mean, I think we would probably agree that issue 46 is the best one so
Oh
far.
yeah.
Where
Yeah.
everybody's whispering and all that. But
Hmm.
it's a good cover for this issue.
Hmm.
So yes.
Well, and I had the same thought about, the star, the composition of the star on the cover, right? But where this takes some artistic license in the depiction of the star, um, I'm okay with it here.
Hmm.
It's the artistic license in the story itself involving the White Dwarf star that I have many, many issues, but we'll get to that.
I'm ready to jump in if you are.
Do you mind if I start with this? So the listeners know, when I first started taking my notes a while back on this, I let Peter know that I was reading the Bible for it because the title is, so even though the cover says "To Catch a Falling Star," as I said earlier, the title of the story is "A Time to Die," which is, that I think it's a pretty well-known, famous bit from the Bible, and this is a reference to Ecclesiastes 3:2, and I'm going to read the whole thing here, Peter.
Okay.
To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. There's more to it after that, but all of that, especially that last part that starts with a time to kill and a time to heal, I think is very has a direct connection to this whole story
Hmm.
and where it's headed and what the plan is and what the overall impact of this conspiracy may or should have on the Legion as a whole.
Hmm.
And so I'm really curious how that's gonna. I mean, actually, I do know. I mean, because when I came back to the Legion and started reading it after 50, I know what happens, but I've also forgotten since then. So it doesn't quite pan out the way that I would like to have seen,
Hmm.
but it's an interesting idea that Levitz uses this teeny quote from that whole passage uh, to be part of, to title this story by. But it does beg the question, a time to die. Who dies in this issue, Peter?
Hmm.
What is the death in this issue?
I mean, the way the title is presented on the splash page, die is the word that is prominent.
Yep.
My reading of it would suggest that the more important word is time, right? Because that's the word that gets repeated throughout the whole thing. A time to live, a time to dance, a time to die. So this is a time, again, if you're going by the emphasis, a time to die. Um,
Well, and that's just melodrama, right? For a
sure.
comic book melodrama,
Yeah. And Starfinger, that's his plan, right? He wants the Legionnaires to die.
right?
The conspirators want possibly the same thing,
Hmm.
right?
Yes, of course.
Um, so I would think that would be the connection. I would think.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I was thinking as well.
yeah.
But it occurred to me just now because you pointed out the emphasis of the word die.
Hmm.
Who is standing next to that?
Oh, interesting. I mean, we're we're sort of jumping the gun a little bit, but Levitz would
Yeah.
certainly know that by now,
Yes.
and that could lead back to Censor Girl's conversation with them about be careful, right? Make sure you're in the right consequences, right? So it could all backfire in the long run, which could also feed into that. But that, again, we're jumping issues here, but
Hmm.
I see what you're saying. Sorry for being cryptic, listeners.
Well, since you just talked about that Sensor Girl thing, well, no, I'll wait. I'll wait
Yeah.
until when we get to that scene because I have a question for you about that too.
Okay.
So, but okay, I did break this down a little bit too, as well.
Hmm.
A Time to Die. I immediately thought of Superboy's death,
Hmm.
and then the other thing that I just mentioned, the secret conspiracy. Is that dying? Is it no longer a secret? Just playing on what a death is,
Hmm.
the death of something, right? A Time to Kill, the conspirators' goal. I mean, they have basically said this without being explicit.
Hmm.
A Time to Heal, their grief, the conspirators' grief over Superboy's death, and what their conspiracy may result in. I don't, I'm at this point I'm reading way too much into it, but it was kind of fun. A Time to Break Down, the team torn asunder by this conspiracy, which doesn't may or may not play out.
Hmm.
A Time to Build Up, Weep, Laugh, Mourn, Dance, and I'm like, maybe after issue 50, the things we'll see some things like that. But if I were if we were doing this in real time, these are the things that I'd be thinking about
Right.
for what
Exactly.
comes next. Yeah.
And if you layer that into Element Lad's thoughts on issue 11 about, you know, but then the Legion is getting more extreme, I guess. It's changing again somehow. I can feel it, even if I can't figure out why. So many strange new faces, Atmos demanding membership, old faces looking so grim. And then he cuts to the action,
Right.
which when I got to that part, I wasn't sure if that was Element Lad speaking or Paul Levitz speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it seemed like to me. Is like
Yeah.
Paul's. This is commentary from the writer.
Because I don't know if I necessarily, I mean, the old face is looking grim. Yeah, the Legion, a lot of the members have been on the, have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. But again, the storylines that we've been reading have been so emotional. I mean, the
Hmm.
Universo Project, Millennium, Superboy's death. There's just been issue after issue of heavy Legion altering stuff. So, uh, is this their trauma period? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like the first year of the Legion was there was some really fun stuff. The Lido artwork certainly allowed for that. Then you got the new five members come into it, and that makes it fun, and different. And then there's a mystery, but we come out of it in celebration that, oh, we got Princess Projector back or Queen Projector back. And then it's just been a roller coaster of oh, you almost got taken over completely by Universo. Oh, Superboy and your history is changed forever. Oh, Laurel Kent is not Laurel, just bam after bam after bam. So I could see that aspect of it. Is
Yeah.
the Legion changing? Again, like you said, that's Levitz. That's Levitz saying, let me prep the readers because I'm already working on issues beyond issue 50 and they might not like where we're going. So let me throw it in here now.
Well, and at a meta level too, he's going to be departing at some point, or he had thoughts of departing, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the different artist changes over time, but that's normal for comic books. So, but yeah, I thought that was I had a similar thought about that particular bit of reflection on Element Lad's part.
Yeah.
But it's interesting the way that LaRoque draws his face. I know now I'm diving into here, but he's bemused. He's got a slight smile on his face as he's pondering, sort of, in some way, sort of heavy stuff. But it's surface level for him at the moment. But he's just kind of thinking about things.
Yeah. I will say though, it is a different book than it began with because we don't get a lot of the quieter moments anymore. Like
Mm.
when was the last time we saw Element Lad and Siobhan together? Um, when have we gotten an extended scene of everybody just hanging out in the Legion headquarters? We might have gotten like a double splash or one scene, but not like an extended scene. When have we dealt with something on a character emotional level and not just here's the big bad that we have to beat up? So maybe he's right. Maybe there have been some changes. Maybe it's Levitz reflecting and going, "Phew, can we stop with the world dominating threats and just go punch a robber every now and then?"
Well, so okay, on that comes back to Starfinger for me because as I was writing the synopsis and I got to that scene, that first scene with Starfinger and his not board of directors, his staff,
Yeah.
right, his heads of staff. I'm like, this is so corporate. This is so unusual. And some part of me doesn't like it, and some part of me does because
Oh, I love it.
it's so weird that
Yeah.
Starfinger is the CEO of this crime syndicate, and he's got these department heads, and they're reporting, and I mean, there's some dire consequences if things don't go right
Yeah.
in this organization. But it's as I said, it's a corporate thing, and it's just that's so weird for the Legion. I mean,
Right.
they've what was his name? Macaulay that
Leland
we've
McCauley.
Leyland Macaulay. He was kind of that way too, but they didn't really get into his organization. He was just kind of the figurehead of things, and they really only dealt with him, or
Right.
we only really saw him
Right.
in relation to whatever machinations he was up to.
Yeah.
But here we've gotten a few scenes now in this arc with Starfinger and his crew, and what was interesting about this one was um, not only did he not kill the armorer, which the armorer was surprised about, but oh gosh, his arranger was like, hmm, what's this? Why is this? Why did he not kill him? And so I'm thinking this is either nothing, just a throwaway bit of dialogue or thought on that character's part, or there's something now that the arranger is he's going to suddenly become more important to the story overall, to
Hmm.
the Starfinger plot. Kind of like I don't know if have you seen all of Deep Space Nine, Peter?
No.
Oh, okay. Then I won't say. There's a character that's introduced as a minor character early on in the show, and then becomes a much more important character to the overall plot of the the story at the end. So it reminded me of that, in other words.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I quite liked, the whole Starfinger thing. It doesn't mean I necessarily want to read issue after issue with him,
Oh,
but
good God, no.
it's a throwback to his first appearance where he was bombastic and you had to get to learn the way his organization works. I even miss the little bit of dialogue from his earlier appearances where he would say something like, I don't know, stupendous, and then he would go on, or he would say something like, inquisitive. He always prefaced his dialogue with some kind of descriptor. So that's sort of missing. But what I liked about it is he's unpredictable. He goes to quote unquote kill the armor, but really he's using it as a way to say, "Hey, dummy, it's the ring." Like my ring. Look how powerful my ring is. Look how powerful the Legionnaires' rings are. Um, it gives us a way to move it into this silly plan he has about some ultimate weapon that can kill the Legion, and it's a complete throwaway until you start to think about how much it mirrors what's going on with the conspirators too, who also have an ultimate weapon that they want to
Mm-hmm.
use. You know what I mean?
Right.
So whether Levitz is making that parallel on purpose, I don't know, but I did. Also, it's just silly things like they all are wearing visors because he's probably glowing. Starfinger, that headpiece probably just glows consistently. So they all have these visors on their face, which I don't know, it's a dumb look, but I just thought that was you can even see it in the shadow work, right? It's a blinding white light
Yep.
and then their shadow. And even Cam's part of it, a lot of it is illogical. A lot of it is just like it doesn't make sense. Why would they trust one person to go? It's just none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I took it for what it is, as you said earlier. I was just kind of reading it, and Cam running from the science police. That's kind of fun and silly. This is another part where I wish LaRoque was a little more creative with some of the creature designs. In fact, like when he turns into that green puppy rabbit thing, there was a it's on page 20. There was a puppy that the Legion Academy fought in my very first issue of Legion in Legion 304. It was like this giant puppy thing. And I was like,
Right.
he
That's
could have,
right.
he should have turned into that. So, um, and it all just leads to, like you said before, like this kind of overly dramatic ending and cliffhanger. So there's like, I don't have a lot of notes for the whole Starfinger thing, but I guess my overall note was it didn't bother me this much in this issue like it did in the previous two chapters.
Agreed.
Um, I still want movement. I still want something to happen. My writerly brain will say these two stories should converge. If you're putting this much attention to the two stories, they should converge somewhere. Now, I've figured out how they do that thematically, but not how I don't think they're going to do it on the page. One thing I will say though too, which I think we've been missing or just haven't brought up, is on page 6, it says beneath the canals of Mars. This is where Starfinger has been in this storyline. He's been on Mars. And then you also take a look at the way LaRocque is drawing his head, where we can actually kind of see hair, which I don't think that was a thing in his first appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and check. Um, the clues are there about his identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you have to really know what issue it's referencing to understand. So I thought that was it snuck by me even to this chapter where I was like, oh wait, I keep writing in my notes that he's on Mars. Duh. That's a clue. It's got to be a clue, right? Like, we know it because we know where it's ending up, but um, that will turn into a clue for later issues.
And so since you pointed this out on page 6, right? This is where I start to get nitpicky because, the science police have been looking for Starfinger. The Legion has been looking for Starfinger. There's a big giant star formation on the surface of the planet. I realize Mars is a big planet, you know, but come on.
And as we learned from Who's Who in the Legion number 3, which we'll talk about later, there is a science police building on Mars. Yeah,
That Gigi is now running, right?
right, right.
Yeah. So I
I mean,
hope to God they address that, but
the science police are not all that. I've never
very
put
true.
much stock into
Yeah,
the
that's
science
true. Defund the science police.
police. So,
I like how I like your thought about the thematic connection between the two. If that's all that we get, do you think that's enough, or should they actually converge in some plot like way?
it's a big book. There's no, Levitz is used to telling multiple stories. They don't have to converge. It's just, I wish they would. But there really is probably no logical way to make that happen. And I just looked at Starfinger's first appearances, and he is drawn with a little bit of hair design, so it has been there from the beginning. I feel
Is
like it's
it?
more pronounced here.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask you. I think that's how I felt about it without having looked at it. So,
Yeah. For me, thematically, I just like the parallels of two organizations that have a group or something within that organization that is working against the ideals, if you want to call it that, or whatever, of the main organization. So you have the Legion of Superheroes, which is an organization at this point, and within it is this conspiracy that is doing something that, if the other people found out, they're not going to be happy. Starfinger has an organization. He has an infiltrator that, if he finds out, he's not going to be happy. One is a good organization that has a handful of people doing not so good things, and the other one is a bad organization that has a possibly bad thing, but he's actually infiltrating it to do good. So then they were both dealing with ultimate, quote unquote, ultimate weapons, the failure of one, the quote unquote success of the other, because Starfinger has his Legion ring. So that parallel and the urgency of Mon-El and the White Dwarf versus Cam and trying to replicate this ring. There was just some unintended, I think, parallels going on. I have to imagine. Maybe not. Um, but it was the first time I felt like this story arc called Conspiracy really umbrellaed the entire issue, not just one storyline.
hmm
And even though that, like I said, I don't think that's Levitz's plan. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just happenstance. But that's why I was like, oh, see, that would be where, if they could come together somehow, that would be sweet. But I don't think it's going to happen.
So this is where I bumped on the arranger and his reaction to the armorer not being obliterated, and so could that develop into something where he teams up with Cam or something, right?
Mm.
Uh, I doubt that's going to happen
Yeah.
because we only have 2 issues left. Um, And I know, what issue 50 is more concerned with.
Right. Right.
So, but I found that an interesting, it would be an interesting plot development if that were the case. Um, should we talk about Colossal Boy then, since we've talked all about the other Starfinger stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Let's wrap that up. Yeah.
Even though we haven't talked about the beginning of the issue
Hmm.
yet.
That's fine.
So here is a conspiracy within a conspiracy,
Oh yeah.
right? Because Cam, so he disappeared. Was it last issue or the issue before? I forget.
Right. Cam was, I mean, Colossal Boy
It,
took off. Yeah.
sorry, Colossal Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he just up and disappears, and suddenly he's this Dr. Herzeg, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Which, by the way, I looked up. I tried to see if that was like if Colossal Boy was impersonating an existing character,
Right.
and I could not find any reference to this doctor
Right.
for previous appearances. So, but he didn't tell anybody, let alone his best friend Cam, that he's doing this. Uh, and so, yeah, you've got him infiltrate. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place. Starfinger's organization sucks because he's got two Legionnaires in disguise working for him. Unless he realizes it, but that doesn't make sense given Starfinger's apparent. How do I say this? The way he viciously attacked Colossal Boy in that one issue, which caused the Colossal Boy's injury, right?
Hmm.
So if he knows these things, why is he allowing it? Anyway, okay. So just that's just probably a dumb thought that we can just set aside. But I just so this organization is really bad, um, but it is deadly,
Hmm.
and we've got two Legionnaires now trying to take him down separately. And what's going to happen now that, well, what I doubt Colossal Boy would recognize Cam in his Reefage identity. So at what point do they team up and continue this takedown of Starfinger? So that makes it a little more interesting to me
Yeah.
that we have Cam's doing something with somebody else now. I
Yeah.
guess maybe that's what I've been waiting for is like he's not getting anywhere by himself. In fact,
Right.
he keeps failing. The fact that he's still alive is really curious to me. Why does Starfinger think that Reefage may be of some use still?
I kind of got the sense that I don't know why, but I kind of got the sense that Colossal Boy knows that Cam is there. I mean, we do know that from a previous issue where they had a scene together. They talked about Starfinger. So I think Colossal Boy could easily make the assumption about his detective friend that, oh yeah, he's out there. And maybe Colossal Boy learned enough information to realize who Starfinger actually is, which would make sense given what we know from the
Right.
prior issue as well.
Yeah.
So all of those things put together, you're right. That's why Cam has an espionage squad, so he doesn't do it by himself. And this is what best friends do, and Colossal Boy's coming to the rescue, and because Cam has also been away for a while, so all of that is the reason why that cliffhanger works for me, even if the logistics of it don't make any sense at all. Like
Right.
because I'm like, okay, I get it, and you either have to say Starfinger is just his organization is just so big that he can't see everything, or he does see everything and doesn't care because maybe it's exactly what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know yet.
That's a great thought. I cannot get behind the idea that he is this mastermind that knows everything, though, given what we've been shown of him.
Right.
But I will say, when you were talking earlier about Starfinger and his organization, it struck me this is a James Bond villain,
Mm, interesting.
and it's Spectre, right? And so now that I'm thinking of it that way, I kind of can forgive or maybe let go a little bit of my disdain for this character. Because now it's suddenly, with this super weapon that they've developed to kill Legionnaires anywhere, but they need something to attune. How would they be able to attune it? Well, how would they know that it would kill Legionnaires anywhere if they haven't tested it and they are able to tune it? But so that just means it's just some weapon that they can point at anybody and kill them wherever. Okay, how does that work over the space-time continuum? It's just so
But
bizarre and crazy.
yeah,
And like I said, thinking about it as a James Bond type thing, I can forgive it a little more.
yeah, yeah,
And so now I want them to just totally embrace this bombastic craziness of Starfinger and his organization, and not try to make it like uh, a kingpin like organization, right? Kind of street level type stuff, which is kind of what we've been seeing before with
hmm
extortion and murder, and things like a typical crime family drama type stuff. Let's go nuts now with Starfinger, and I think I will like it much better.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you have to allow for it because of the heaviness of the conspiracy story, and
Yes, exactly.
yeah, I think that probably wraps up the Starfinger part of this issue. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
yeah,
Like I
okay,
said, I enjoyed it for the first time
yeah,
since his introduction. So, I, good on the art, the creative team, I guess.
okay. So the conspiracy side of all this.
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
first off, this addresses my complaint that you were like, yeah, it makes sense, telepaths and all that. How Tellus could glean this information from such a seasoned telepath as Saturn Girl.
hmm
So, which on the first page, Duo Damsel says he plucked the information right out of Saturn Girl's mind, to which Saturn Girl says, "Damn." And Brainiac Five, the obvious consequence of having two telepathic Legionnaires, Saturn Girl. At least he didn't recognize or realize you were conspirator to Duo Damsel. So,
Right.
okay, they addressed it, but whatever.
Which could speak to their convictions, right?
The
Could speak
true.
could speak to how conflicted or how into the conspiracy they actually are. Saturn Girl might be conflicted, whereas Duo Damsel maybe isn't. Maybe she's, or vice versa. I don't know. You know. Uh,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like this idea. I so far I would say I don't think Saturn Girl has any reservations.
I don't know.
But yeah, we're not getting a lot from her specifically. We're just seeing her react to things.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't. I think we might get a little bit of her reservations where, like, when they're finally confronted on 25
Hmm.
by Cosmic Kid's brother, Cosmic Boy's boy. I'm just messing up all my boys and kids. Cosmic Boy's brother, which has to mean something,
Uh-huh.
right? And she says, Paul, I'm surprised at your tone. What we do is our own business. To which Tella says, Saturn Girl, of all of us, you surely realize what an unlegionnaire-like answer that is. So for her to even go against herself, her what she founded within the Legion, maybe it does mean she's like a little scary, like it's not the Ice Queen, it's not the Saturn Girl Ice Queen coming out there. I don't think at all. Just especially the way that it's drawn, Again, LaRoe, he's hit and miss when it comes to physical
Hmm.
characterization.
Well,
Um,
okay, to that point though, when she says that to Paul,
mhm.
um, her face is in shadow. So, which, that could symbolize the conspiracy within, that could be hiding her true feelings about the situation, even though she's committed to it. It's yeah, it's really hard to tell based on what we are seeing on the page.
Yeah.
And then we get the 2 panels later when they basically, or not basically, they literally turn their backs on their accusers and walk away. But we don't really see much of an expression on her face, which that would be a perfect opportunity to give us some insight into what she's feeling or
Yeah.
thinking at that moment.
That's sort of the unanswered question yet, which we're not going to get, I guess, until the next two issues of just
Hmm.
really we get Brainy, we get Monel. You kind of get Duo Damsel in how sort of very set she is about, tell us last issue, I'll take care of it. And the way she's presented here, hey guys, come on, you're messing up a little bit. You know, he plucked the
Well,
information right out.
yeah, but she also says, do we have to become liars now to fulfill our oath? I think she's having second thoughts about this, or at least in the way that they're going about it, perhaps.
I think that's what it is. I think it's
Okay.
more. I think she's probably like, come on, we really got to get. If we're gonna do this, let's do it.
Mm.
I think it's more of that. I feel you could be right, or it's just that, or it's just that's not where she wants to go. Right? Like, hey, I'm totally down with this, but not if we have to do this, this, and this.
Betray their comrades, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I bet, my sense of Duo Damsel in this situation is that, one of her students, whom she has been tutoring, mentoring, to become a Legionnaire for I don't know how long, right?
Mhm.
But the implication is it's been a while. They finally make it onto the Legion. She's not part of the Legion, but she has that history, and they come to her, or Tellus comes to her, and says, "Hey, I found this out from Saturn Girl," and then she has to go, don't tell anybody, tell us, I'll take care of it. But she's part of it. So I can only imagine that how guilty she feels for I guess that's a lie in a sense that
Mhm.
don't tell anybody, I'll take care of it. Yeah, she is, but not in the way that she's implying. But lying to her former student, lying to a Legionnaire, keeping this all from everybody else, all this stuff. So yeah, my sense of her is that she's having trouble with this, but I kind of like your assessment of it better. It's like, give me either way, give me a little bit more as to how these conspirators are feeling, other than they're committed to this project to get revenge on something.
Yeah.
So, on that same vein, Brainiac Five is such a intellectual, logical person, and yet he's being very emotional with this situation. And we've seen him in the previous issues, with the language he uses and whatnot. He's very emotional about this as well. And it may be, I think you pointed this out maybe last episode or the one before. It's uh, um, it was in part because of his work with the time stream that and the time beacon and all that stuff that these things happened, and so
Mhm.
he feels some guilt there, at the very least, but maybe a whole range of other emotions that he may be feeling, anger and whatnot, and not to mention, of course, the most important of them, Superboy, was killed in the course of that adventure. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just want a little bit more. That you're talking about the quiet moments. That's to me, that's the kind of stuff I really dig. Is let's get into the psychology and the emotionality of these characters and express that on the page a little more,
Yeah.
and not be so plot driven. But I get it. It's a superhero comic book. That's really what what that is. So
And you could also say too, though, we are getting glimpses of how this conspiracy is failing. Again, if you want to go to Chameleon Boy, his mission failed. This mission failed because they're putting people at risk. There, as Brainy says, there's no way to test what he's about to do without actually doing it. you know. Um, the you can argue, even though we're going to get into the whole white dwarf thing, you can argue that that is part of the reason why this conspiracy is not going to work, because they are not really in their right mind
Yeah.
when it comes to what their purpose is, and you know, what Sensor Girl's warning, as Brainy brings up in this issue. I was trying to look at what Duo Damsel has said in the previous two issues. She doesn't say much. In last issue, she ends with, um, she says, tell us, don't say anything to anyone. You are my teacher, Duo Damsel. You are a retired Legionnaire, so it is not as though I betray our secrets to an outsider. And then she thinks, no, but I didn't teach you that most Legionnaires realize we're Legionnaires for life and think of ourselves that way, and that's certainly how Saturn Girl was thinking of me that day when she brought this conspiracy to my door. So if we're seeing Brainiac slipping, if Saturn Girl can slip so that Tellus can pick up her thoughts, Mon-El, you could say, is too emotional to stand up to Brainiac 5 and say, you can't do this. You can't bring a white dwarf star to Earth. It's not going to work. Because he's questioning as he's getting the damn thing. So it's like all of them we're seeing the cracks in this plan. And then I put that with Sensor Girl's warning, and I was trying to think of that again, like why would she approach that way to him? And I don't think we said it last time around, but I think one of the other reasons why she is trying to almost steer them away is because is she trying to put in their face that Superboy would not want this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're thinking of him, and yet you're not thinking of him in the way that he should be thought of.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things make for very questionable choices that they have in this issue, like the White Dwarf Star.
Well, before I jump in on that part, I want to touch on what you just said about Sensor Girl and what she said before, because it just occurred to me. I will preface this by saying I'm going to stretch this a little bit, but her comment last issue, and I had questions about that
Mm-hmm.
then, and so on the surface, to me, it seemed like last issue that she was saying, trust that you and your co-conspirators are in the right or accept the consequences, which I found a weird way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And given what she does in this issue, which that was a great scene, so we need to get into that, or the way it was depicted, I mean. So she basically says, trust you guys are doing the right thing. That's kind of how you could take that, what she said to Brainiac 5. But then she turns right around in this issue and basically is like, nope, you can't, you can't do these kind of things. So she takes. Oh, and there's the other conspiracy within a conspiracy of this issue, right? Not just with Starfinger, but with what happens there. But okay. So here's my way out thought. Trust
Mm-hmm.
that you and your friends are in the right. What if she doesn't mean his co-conspirators, but the Legion itself? If you trust in your friends,
Mm-hmm.
we will do things the right way.
Yeah.
We'll do right by Superboy, like you were saying. There's so many levels here that you could look at this as.
Well, sure. I mean, if you add that to the scene where, first of all, I love that the people that are closing in on the conspirators, it's Sensor Girl, it's Tellus, and Magnetic Kid. First of
Hmm.
all, giving Magnetic Kid something to do. But they are three of the newest members of the Legion. You
Uh-huh.
almost wish Tellus was involved. You almost wish Polar Boy was involved. Um,
You mean Quizlet?
Quizlet, excuse me, Quizlet,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, because if there's anybody that's probably going to adhere to the Legion constitution and rules and traditions, it's going to be the newest members, right?
Right. That's true.
Barring Sense Girl, but
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. Um, so I love that that she comes to them and she says, there is a dark pact operating within the Legion, my innocent telepathic friend. I like that. It's kind of like letting him know that he's not doing anything wrong.
Hmm.
I fear that lives are at stake if we do not act to confront the conspirators. Um, Use this moment instead to listen. Let me tell you what I know of the conspiracy in our midst, whose dark dream it is, and why and how we must oppose it.
Yeah.
So if she can't get through to them directly, then she has to do something, right?
But what is she trying to get through to them?
That they're wrong, that what they're about to do could have really terrible consequences for them. Every time they mess with that certain individual, things go bad.
Right. But she said, trust that you and your friends are in the right. Why would she say that?
In the previous issue,
Yeah, in the previous issue. And now she says, and we must oppose it.
well, that's if you're going with the way you just described it. Yes, like if it was the Legion as a whole.
No, not if you took it as I did on the surface from last issue, that
Mhm.
she's meaning only Brainiac Five and the others in the
Right.
conspiracy. If she's saying trust that you guys are right, but then turns right around and involves Tellus and Magnetic Kid, saying that there's a conspiracy here and we must oppose it. I'm trying to understand what she seems to be saying two different things to two
Well,
different groups.
I think you also have to finish it though. Trust that you and your friends are in the right, or accept the consequences.
But I think that Brainiac Five and the others do think they're doing the right thing, at least for them.
For them, right? But I
Right.
think,
Yeah.
but she's saying there are alternatives to what you're about to do. I think that's what she's saying there. As we talked
Then oh,
about the
so this
last
is
time.
so this is
Trust that
this is
trust that you're in the right, or accept the consequences. Because if you're not in the right, it's almost like her saying, "Go think about this again. Go to your room and think about what you just did or what you're going to do." That's what she's trying to say. She's almost like
I,
trying to talk him out of it.
I agree, but that's a really weird way to say that.
Oh, I don't think so. Like we said the last issue, she was in that position. She's in the position they're in of wanting. Monel says it, right? Doesn't he say it? Let me see. Where's that? Right there on page 5. Let's see. Nothing will not on this air. Let's see. Solar winds blowing me about, but they won't stop me. Nothing will not on this errand. That dwarf star is my key to the future and vengeance. That's not Legionnaires don't talk about vengeance, right? That was what that whole, having just, as I mentioned earlier, listened to the up to issue episode 7, having listened to the eye for an eye again, vengeance was a key word. And Paul Levitt set that up right from the beginning about like vengeance. It's not only villains, it's lovers, it's friends. So vengeance is the key. Trust that your vengeance is right, because if you're not, you're going to go against Legion, we're going to kick you out, somebody could die. You can't do what I did. I was a queen. I can kill Nemesis Kid and get away with it, which she did.
Hmm.
But she also had to suffer a penance for. That's why she sent a girl in the first place, because they're
Right.
like, you our planet got disrupted, look, all this death. So I don't know if this is what you're saying. I don't think she's saying to them, I'm behind you, trust you got this. I don't think she's saying that at all. Like, I don't think that's what you're saying, right? She's not on their side.
All I'm saying is I think that's a an ambiguous way to say what I think she means, what you're saying
Mhm.
she's actually saying. I don't like how Levitt's phrased that, I
Yeah.
guess.
I think it's because he's not admitting it. They're not admitting it to her, where she even says, "Don't lie to me when silence can serve you as well, and be less rude. Don't lie to me." And yet he still does not say, "You're right. I know what this is what he's not bringing her into, so she has to go find a different way. And I don't know what that different way is because I don't remember what's coming up. I
Hmm.
don't know how she factors into whatever it is that happens. Because if she has to like if she has to go in and pull their butt out of the fire based on all this, then she's right. Then she's proven right. Um, does she if what they do is successful and doesn't come back to bite him in the butt, which we know does not happen. We do know there are consequences. That at least I remember. Uh, then they have to live with whatever they did,
Hmm.
which is also a consequence, which also kind of proves her right too. She can live with what she did, as hard ass as she is. She can, and mysterious. She can live with it, what she did.
Hmm.
Maybe she doesn't want to see her friends do that. It's almost like saying, a little kid like wants to jump off of a high table. All right, don't jump off the table. I'm going to do it. Don't. I'll be fine. Don't. All right, go ahead. Go ahead. You think you know better? Go ahead, jump. And then they jump and hurt themselves, and you say, "See,
But
told you."
okay, but see, you're in your example. I know
Mhm.
you're dumbing it down for me, but um, you're being direct with that theoretical child, right? She's not. I don't see that she is being as direct as she could
Oh,
to be
sure.
clear about what she is saying.
But when
Whereas
you're,
with
I think when you're colleagues though, who have had that much experience with each other, don't you kind of want to like, do I really have to be the one to tell you that what you're doing is not right? You're Brainiac 5. You're Saturn Girl. Do I
yeah,
really need to say, don't do what you're about to do? You're really okay. I don't know. I don't
all
know.
right. Well,
That's hard.
and given that how direct she is with her now co-conspirators, how we must oppose it. I know I'm beating a dead horse now, but I'll be curious to see how this develops next issue, and what that really means in terms of Censor Girl's involvement of this. Or
Yeah, and what it means to oppose. Does it mean
yeah,
just tell everybody, like tell on
mm-hmm,
them, like tell because the Polar Boys Legion leader at this point, that's one
mm-hmm,
more member of the five, which is
right,
interesting.
yes,
It is also interesting. I didn't think of them as conspirators too. I kind of like that. Again, I almost wish there was one more so you can
oh yeah,
tell us as Saturn Girl. Do they have counterparts, within?
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
not really.
yes.
Um,
Well, I mean, yeah. Other than the number, yeah, you kind of do because Censor Girl is what she fills the. What'd you say? Is that Saturn Girl?
well,
You would
Tellus
say?
would be Saturn Girl, right?
Oh,
Because they're
right,
both
right.
telepaths.
Telep,
But you could also say Saturn Girl as well.
but Magnetic Kid, given that he has a brother with the same power set and they're basically the same character,
Hmm.
that's Duo Damsel. Anyway, so can we spend a minute just talking about the way that this scene that we've been talking
Yeah.
about
Hmm.
is portrayed because we get to see Sensor Girl. She doesn't want. She says, "Your telepathy is but one sense. Tell us there are many that Legionnaires possess that might be used against us. Against us. See, that's partly where I got the idea that she's forming her own group within the group to
Well, and
to deal with this.
she has a big thing about privacy. I mean,
That's true.
she's
Yeah.
yeah.
But have no fear, my power can protect us. Within this globe, no sensory skill can find us. Not superhearing or powers of mind or even magic. And then we get this wonderful negative image like
Hmm.
set of panels with the characters, and they're all colored differently. And um, well, I guess it's just yeah, it's just a few panels on page 10, and just showing them inside this sensory bubble, which is kind of like on a larger scale, kind of, but what she did to Persuader or in
Hmm.
one of the previous issues, essentially blinding him. But this is going way beyond that. So I just really like how they did this.
Yeah,
This was very creative on LaRoque and Gafford.
yeah, I agree. There's one of the art things in here that I was pleased about,
Hmm.
and some of the Mon-El getting the White Dwarf star and a few other images here and there. I was like, okay, that's good. Try stretch your muscles a little bit. That's one thing I think it's probably what LaRoque does better in Flash because he only has to deal with one character, is that he gets to breathe and open that up a little more. And whereas this book, he stayed confined a little bit too much. But when
Mm.
you get these little moments, it's like, okay, good, thank you. Even if it doesn't necessarily make sense panel to panel, the whole when the White Dwarf explodes and there's chaos, like you can't always sequentially follow the narrative in the way like you can with like Perez, right? Like you could Perez just knows how to shift the camera around,
Mm.
that you still are very familiar with the setting and you understand what point of view he's showing you from in this panel versus another panel. And there are a lot of artists that do that well. LaRoque doesn't do that so well. He's certainly okay with using angles, different camera angles, but even like the chase scene where Chameleon Boy is running out of the SP headquarters, some of it like, it doesn't logistically make sense panel to panel sometimes. It's like you can't quite make out the room that he's in because it's he's just drawing, oh, I need a wall here. Oh, I need a roof here. But it doesn't matter if they don't connect. I don't know how they connect. Whereas
Mm.
Perez would like, what is this? He would draw everything and you would know exactly how every rivet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Perez was definitely an architect
yeah, yeah.
in his constructions. Yeah,
But when LaRoque does attempt it, it's like good, okay, good.
yeah.
I'll take
Hmm.
it. I'll take it
Sure.
because it's as creative as he is allowed to be on an ensemble book that has to do so many things.
And to be fair too, and I'm saying this in part to get to my complaints about the White Dwarf stuff. Um, to how do you depict a star
Yeah,
on a
yeah,
comic book page, right? It's like
yeah.
it's a circular object, and you got some Kirby crackle and some flames, but it's not that interesting. So um, I think he did his best trying to depict that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
looking like page 12 when he bursts in, breaks into Brainy's lab with a star. That's kind of been neat looking.
Yeah.
And then yeah, later we get all that explosion type stuff. But he did a pretty good job of trying to evoke what's going on there. But I agree. He's very much a two camera operator
Yeah.
in the way that he presents things.
Yeah. I like page 18, the last panel. That's the best way to depict
Mm, yes.
Star.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mon-El is just basically bleeding into it, or
Yes.
disappearing into. Yeah, that's great. Simple. Like it's
Yeah.
simple. You don't have to do
Hmm.
anything more than that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind? Can I go off?
Go off.
Did you have a problem with the? I know it's comic book science, and there's no. You bend the rules for storytelling. I get that, but at the same time, White Dwarfs. One, how does Mon-El push a star out of the orbit of another star? How does the Earth not get destroyed? The atmosphere just ignite instantly when the star is brought into onto Earth. Um, how does Block and Mon-El later push? How do you push a star? That's what the title of this issue should have been. How do you push a star?
Plus a white dwarf, which is technically heavier, right? Is it the
Yes,
whole? Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
As far as I could tell, there are things stranger in the universe than we can ever conceive, and I'm horribly butchering that quote because I can't remember it. But um, uh, as far as I could tell, because I did some research, it's like astronomy is something that I've always been interested in, and so when I see things being egregiously wrong on the page, I'm like, I can't, Peter. I'm sorry. And sorry, listeners, but a white dwarf star should be about the size of the Earth, not this tiny little object that that they're dealing with. Yeah, and it's you, you can't do anything. You can't do anything that they show in here with a white dwarf star. What was that you said when before we started recording about the atom?
Oh, I said if Ray Palmer can do it
Yeah,
in the
and
20th
that
century.
and that was a piece of a white dwarf
Fragment.
star, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, fragment, whatever the hell that means.
Yeah.
So I know, I get it. It's like with Adam, it's like, yeah, okay, I guess. But I could not get over this this horrible bending of the rules, and I have to say, most. I mean, it was apparently the readers at the time had problems with it too, and I was pleased to see that to the point that let's see. Paul Levitt says the main thing that followed Monel's arrival with the star was a small flood of constructive criticism from our resident hard science fiction fans and physicists. And so they give a few letters, commenting about that. But then he says, we offer no excuse that bad science is acceptable for comics, much less for science fiction. Nor do the pervasive illogical elements inherent in the Legion offer an excuse, although and here he's like, yeah, okay, but although there are violations of the law of conservation of matter and energy inherent in half the Legionnaires' powers and worse, our rule of thumb has always been that bending logic and science was permissible, and I'm okay with that, me saying this, when it made the story more entertaining and more easily told, and readers themselves could fill in the gaps consciously or unconsciously. In over 100 Legion tales and far more stretches of the scientific truth, this is the first time we've been so out of line that it hurt the reading value of the story to a significant group of readers. Hallelujah. Thank you so much. You may now go out the door, Paul Levitz. Or no, what? I'm sorry. Go back into what is it he said? Go hide in your psychological assault-proof bunker. I'm sorry. That was the biggest thing that drew me out of this, which I feel like was a pretty good issue, more than a pretty good issue, as we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
The only other thing that since I'm on my rant and I will stop after this, is that they changed Reefage's eyes in this issue. Did you notice that?
Oh no.
They're green. They're all green, like coriander.
Oh, I see. I see.
And before this, he had pupils and he had what looked like human eyes, and now he has these green alien eyes. What the hell? What? Why? How did this get by? Why did they change this?
Karen.
Yes.
There's one way Levitz could have come out of this whole White Dwarf thing.
There any number of ways they could have done something with this, right?
It's in the issue.
Yeah.
On page 16, someone says, amazing, you're containing an entire dwarf star inside your device. To which Brainy says, actually, Saturn Girl, it's being held in a tesseract that's primarily in an adjacent dimension from which the solar energies are being extracted. So had he had Mon-El take the white dwarf and go to that dimension, and then he created a tunnel and never brought it to Earth, then he had to bring it to Earth to put it in the Tesseract, whereas he should have made the Tesseract out in space. He should have had Mon-El take the Tesseract and wrap it around the white dwarf, which again, none of it makes sense, but at least it's not bringing it to Earth. And
yes, exactly.
Yeah, so he built his
too.
own answer in here, probably thinking, "Oh, see, I can get away with it." But, it didn't work
It
that way.
wasn't quite there, yeah. And what this neighboring dimension, they're going to be okay. Whoever's there with sudden solar flares and just
Well,
appearing.
Marvel, every official handbook of the Marvel Universe entry talks about Hulk gets mass from an unnamed dimension, and the Dark Force,
Hmm.
anybody who has shadow powers is because of this unnamed dimension. I mean,
Right.
they have so many of those things. All
Oh,
you just got to do is tap into it.
they could change that now with the theoretical dark matter stuff
Yeah, yeah,
instead of dimensional sources. So
yeah.
yeah. See, that's the kind of stuff I like, where it's like they take this idea and extract it and make it work for the story. But when you're dealing with something like, bringing a star into Earth's atmosphere, no, unless like you said, you wrap it up in something, it's
Yeah,
not, you can't do that. So, okay, I'm done.
yeah.
I'm done.
Mon-El's part of that story, though, I will always accept because he is considered to be the most powerful humanoid in the DC universe. So I will, if
Sure.
Superman can go live in a sun for millions of years and come out like a golden Superman,
Yeah,
Mon-El can go and
could
or
push a star.
in All Star Superman, where isn't the key to his fortress made of white dwarf material
Yes,
so
that's
he can
right.
pick it
Yeah.
up, right? And if he can do it, Mon-El can do it. Anything Superman can do, Mon-El can do backwards and in heels, whatever that saying is. So,
Okay. All right.
all right, are we good? I don't
Yes.
really have anything else for that issue, I think.
Um, Let me see here. I think yeah, because I think that pretty well covers it.
Hmm.
There are other things. It's like element la yeah, well, no, I'm going back to complaining, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I mean, I did like the one. I guess maybe the last comment
Hmm.
is we get to the very end of the issue and Dr. Hazig is saying, take this, a Legion flight ring, which I have teleported from one of their tombs on Shanghala. I mean, that's somebody, in the business world who's thinking outside the box,
Yeah.
thinking lateral thinking, although, it's just Colossal Boy's ring, I assume.
It
But the
could be
idea
anything,
of
yeah.
of taking one out of Shanghala, that's brilliant
And creepy.
and creepy and really dangerous.
Yeah.
Given, why would I get it? It's like a badge of honor type thing to bury them with it. But that's a piece of technology that you don't want other people just accessing.
Yeah.
So,
I have three things from the letter column about this issue.
mhm.
The very first letter, Malcolm Bourne, this is from issue, I don't know, like 52 or 3 or something like that. Um, or maybe even 51. Malcolm Bourne says, "The hunt for the time trapper," and then he continues on and on. Do we know that? Do we know that because we know what's coming up, and I guess you can surmise what's going on, but it has never really been stated that that's what's going on, correct? Like the words
Mhm.
time
Yeah,
trapper, I don't think have been mentioned yet.
right.
So I wondered, did he just figure it out? Like it's so hard for us to do that because we know what's happening, and
Right.
I just don't know. I just
I
don't.
I, I think it's a fairly easy assumption that one can make,
Okay.
given given the importance of this conspiracy and who's involved, and even though it's not, yeah, been explicitly stated.
Oh, the other one is from the actual issue. Elect the next Legion leader.
I was hoping we were going to talk about that.
Yep. So this book came out in March, and they're saying the deadline is September. That's a long time because if the deadline is in September, they're probably working on a book that'll come out in December or January.
Yeah.
Almost a year from this.
Well, but you got to give people time to, mail in their stuff. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's weird.
So based on what we've been reading for since Polar Boy first got elected in issue, what was it, 36 or something like that. Who would you pick?
Oh my God. Surprisingly, not Polar Boy in the way that he's been depicted. I mean, okay, we have to take into account what we are reading, but not and let go of the idea of,
What we
like
know.
the larger Legion doesn't know what Brainiac Five and the others are doing, right? And so that you would assume that would disqualify any of them if the larger Legion knows about that kind of stuff. Who would make a good Legion leader? Well, you know what? I would vote Dream Girl.
I almost went with that as well. And I think I know who wins, and I probably would vote for that person too,
Hmm.
but I don't want to say.
Okay.
Um, it's a little bit of a cheat because I don't know if I'm really thinking that way because of the issues since issue 36 or just because of what I know. I don't know. But yeah, Dream Girl's always a strong contender, certainly for this volume, right? I might even give Lightning Lass a run.
Mm.
Maybe. Not that I don't necessarily think she has the strongest leadership qualities, but certainly her newfound conviction in the Legion is quite appealing.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Um,
she'd be a good choice. I agree. You know, part of the reason I say Dream Girl is that that scene where they're dealing with the star.
yeah,
You know, Element Lad's there, and he's the deputy leader,
yeah,
and yet Dream Girl is the one who's, she kind of takes charge here.
hmm,
She's like, we need to get more help, so she touches her ring to send out the signal, and then says, "Block, you help Monel. You're invulnerable to the solar radiation. The rest of us can check out the damage to the headquarters in Brady's lab." She's just Element Lad's right there, but he's not performing as a leader. She steps in and does it, and we've talked about that before. How she has done that in other situations.
yeah.
It's like let. I know she's been. Wasn't she leader during the Great Darkness saga? I
I
want to
don't,
say.
I don't remember.
So I know she's been leader before,
Yeah,
or at least maybe deputy leader. I don't remember now. But anyway, I could totally get behind her candidacy,
yeah.
given what we've been shown of her.
And part of me wants Timberwolf to be leader just to
Oh
see
God,
what the heck would happen.
nothing. It'd be worse. I used to like that character a lot, and then after he got his cosmetic surgery to look the way he used, when he originally appeared in the Legion, he just became a very uninteresting character to me.
Hmm.
And that's all Levitt's doing that, making him kind of like the dumb strong guy
Yeah.
stereotype.
All right. We good? We good with that issue?
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we are now going to go into talking about some other DC comics around this time involving Legion or having Legion connections or direct Legion stuff. And we're going to start off by talking about the new series, The Wanderers, issue number 1, which was. When did this come out, Peter?
March 8th of 1988. So,
So before issue 48.
correct.
Interesting. And so this is by Doug Munch. Mensch? Is it Munch? It's Doug Munch.
Hmm.
By Doug Munch, Dave Hoover, Robert Campanella, Todd Klein, Helen Vesic, and Karen Berger. So, Peter, I wanted to start off with what was your. Oh, and a cover by Ken Stacy. So that's a nice through line, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh, Although we'll talk about the cover later. What was your experience with this series back then?
So I think I mentioned before that I was more or less out of comics by this point. The only way I learned about the Wanderers probably was either seeing the ads that were leading up to it, although they don't mention anything about the Legion at all in the ads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly certain I came across back issues because in my collection I've always had issue number one. I could probably even look up the exact date and the exact store of when I picked it up.
Hmm.
So, but didn't really necessarily know anything about them. I just knew that they were part of the Legion world. Oh my God, they got a title. How crazy is that? We've talked last episode when we talked about their first appearance that I just have this strange fascination with them. I've always wanted to read this series. I've never read it. This is actually the first time I've read this issue. So it's like one of those, I always loved obscure DC titles.
Hmm.
This is definitely an obscure DC title.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to remember because, as you said, they did not advertise this as a Legion related book. And yet somehow I got issue one when it was first published.
Mhm.
I cannot remember if I continued on with it. I'm sure I did, but I got rid of the issues over the years. And then within the last, I'll say 10 years, I went and bought all of the issues because I wanted all of the Legion stuff to read eventually. And I guess maybe I must have seen this issue in the comic shop that I would go to. And it says on the cover, from the world of the Legion of Superheroes.
Mhm.
Because we talked about this in, I believe, first in episode 32, where we discussed Who's Who 25 for the Wanderers entry. And we talked about their first appearance in Adventure Comics 375. And they did have a very brief cameo, I think, in the Great Darkness Saga.
Mhm.
But that would have been the Great Darkness Saga issue, whichever issue that was. They appeared, would have been my only exposure to this team. I would not read that Adventure Comics appearance until we did that episode, 32. I recall being excited that the Legion were expanding, or the Legion presence were expanding into this other title, and I was like, okay, how we get to see the 30th century, from a different point of view, or or explore different areas of the Legion universe through these characters. And I have to say, Peter, overall, rereading this issue after what, 88, 30 something years.
Mhm.
How dare you, sir? How dare you make me go through this?
Is it really that bad?
Oh my God, I hated this thing.
I quite enjoyed this.
Really?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I
For
did.
for someone of Doug Munch's caliber,
Yeah,
I was like, what the hell is this?
sure, sure. There's two things going on here concerning Doug Munch's writing. When he can do the narrative stuff, I think that works. When he does the dialogue, it is very much a 1988 book.
Hmm.
I think his dialogue is trying to capture, because this came out well after Justice League and Justice League International, and even though it's not quite there yet, I get the hint that this is like every team book at this point that needs a funny person, a Wolverine, a lead character, a Roman, some kind of magic or psychic woman that's always in peril. Like it's not evident just yet, but it is evident with D'Artagnan. He is clearly the
Yeah.
Guy Gardner Wolverine part. So the narrative stuff, the opening pages, I think are fascinating. I could sit and read all that controller stuff forever because, as we talked about in some of the Legion issues that feature the controllers, I love the controllers. I love anything that adds to their lore. And that is the part where he can get a little more narrative, right? It's told in caption boxes and in some dialogue, but the dialogue is lifted, it's elevated a tiny bit because the
Hmm.
controllers are who they are, right? At this point, this is after Crisis. They are the evolutionary offshoot of the original Owens that also spawned the Guardians of the Universe. So, and then they went to another dimension, and they always want to try to control the evil of the world, but they do it in ways that makes them look quite evil themselves sometimes, you know.
Hmm.
So all that stuff is in play. All that stuff is in play here to the point where the big bad is basically the controller's fault, even though you don't get that till later. So
Right.
I love all that. Love all that stuff. Then you get into like the mystery and the you know the characters come back and then we get dialogue and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is how comics were written in 1980. This is how teen comics were written." Think of Dave Cockrum's Futurians if you've ever read
Ugh,
that. See?
yeah.
Right? Everybody was always up against what was the one character? Werbane, Warhawk, I don't know. I don't know. There was one character in the Futurians that everybody would always be like, "Oh, shut up," you know. Blackmane, I think it was. I think Blackmane was one that was always constantly complaining, and people would be like, "Oh, geez, you know, come on." So
Mm.
anyway, point being, I get a lot of that in this issue, but I sort of forgave it because I was like, okay, it's 1988. Um, then you know, it says, like you said on the cover, from the world of the Legion of Superheroes. You would have no idea this was set in the 31st century, other than if you knew who the Wanderers were.
Hmm.
But there's no location yet. There's no. Do they even mention the year? I don't even think they mentioned the year. Um, the technology could just be in outer space in the 20th century at this point. It doesn't matter, you know. So that is a failing of the first issue, I think. But they're probably banking that if it says World of the Legion of Superheroes, readers who know Legion of Superheroes, the Wanderers, what? If they haven't seen the ads, and then they're like, oh, okay. Certainly the splash page, the second page, if you know their appearance from Adventure Comics 375, you're going, oh yeah, that's the Wanderers. Holy
Hmm.
heck, that's
Yeah.
cool. Um, are there some faults? Absolutely. I don't want to. I don't want to put on this book what I know from later issues because I haven't read them, but I also know that I think they get sillier and whatever.
Oh boy.
Um, but it's like, as this first issue, I was like, oh, I'm okay with this first issue. I took a lot of notes. Not that I'm going to say I'm here, but I took a lot of notes, a lot of interesting, like, I was like, that's cool. I like this. I like that. Oh, that feels very, of course, we have to have the tortured woman thing, you know, and um, there's some easy descriptions of certain powers, yet other ones are a little more complicated. Um, yeah, I did. I dug it. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, okay, so the Doug Munch is like two different writers here. It does also feel, and I think a lot of these creators come from, it feels like a new talent showcase story, right? Like
Yeah.
they're very new. I looked it up, you know. This is very early in Dave Hoover's career. This is really the thing that made him uh, come into comics. He had a few issues before this. And then eventually he would do some issues on the Will Payton Starman series, Captain America in the 90s. By the way, he's no longer with us. He died in 2011. Born in Pennsylvania, like two counties over from me, which was kind of crazy.
Wow.
Um, Robert Campanella, who's the inker, also very new. He would go on to do like the last issues of Suicide Squad, X-Men Adventures, Outsiders in the early 90s over Paul Pelletier artwork, Green Arrow during Connor Hawk, and Helen Vesic, when you look up what she's done, it's the very first thing she's done is like all this new talent showcase stuff. So very, very new. It's like Doug Monk having to work with like, you know, rookies.
Mm.
Um, and I think there's some of that in here, but yet I also look at it and I'm like, I don't think it's bad artwork. Uh, you know, there's some pages I actually really like. There's other pages like, okay, yeah, you can see it's very new. Um, uh, and there's other pages where I'm like, you know, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with that. But Are the designs all that interesting? Nah, you know, they're not all that. What is Aviax wearing? My God, you know. Or Quantum Queen, she's wearing that bathing suit. But again,
Yeah.
1988,
Yeah.
1988. It feels like, you know, this could have been a new universe title or, uh, you know, a Malibu title. I don't know, spin off any other imprint you want to say. So, but for the Legion lore and for the controller lore and some other things, I dug it. I really did. With full knowledge that I knew that maybe you might not, or listeners might not, you know. Like, I'm not going to try to defend it. I'm just going to say I actually enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it.
I just think there was a lot going on. And it's you know, I get it. It's a
Yeah,
first issue. You got to introduce the characters, and not only the characters, but different versions of the characters. You throw in the whole controller thing. I mean, the characters, I mean, other than their dead bodies floating in space, you don't see them for what did I say? Until page 8.
hmm
They don't show up until page 8 of their own series first issue. That's so weird. But I mean, story wise, it makes sense, right? Because
right.
the controller encounters or finds them, clones them, but also changes them for some reason. I don't know that it's explicitly stated there, but there is a larger mission at play here.
Right.
So and all that stuff, like you were talking about with Munch and the caption boxes and describing what that seeing that whole process of the cloning and what he has to do and he clones himself and then the one version of himself goes off to do something while the I guess our main controller for the story stays and deals with the wanderers. And then we get a good bulk of the issue is them showing us what their power sets are and
Right.
kind of giving us in some cases who they are
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
people, as or their personalities. And then also the whatever the monster of the week sort of type storyline.
hmm
There's just a lot to throw in there.
Yeah.
And it was I agree that the arts, it is kind of it seems kind of newish, but I
Yeah.
think it has more to do with the inker than maybe the penciler.
Mm.
Uh, but it was fine. I was kind of joking
No, don't go back.
when I first said
Don't go
that, but
back.
man, what I found funny was I remembered this first issue kind of fondly. And then when I read it now, again, after all those years, I'm like, oh my God, this is not that great.
Mm.
It just seems so, well, what you were talking about it. The word that came to mind when you were saying those things, describing this, was it's very tropey. Lots of tropes,
Yeah.
in terms of like the characters and it's your typical first issue of a middle of the road title where they're introducing new characters. You have to get a sense of who they are and what they can do, right? So they did
Right.
that. Okay,
Right.
that's fine. But it's just like, oh, this could have been so much better.
Yeah.
And what you said about the Futurians, I actually have that in my notes, Peter. I said it reminds me of Cockrum's Futurians, only worse. And I'm being unfair there because I really did not like Futurians. So this is probably slightly better than that.
Yeah. I mean, this is a time period of DC that is, even though I wasn't there reading it because I was out of comics, when I went back to it, it was a very experimental stage for DC that was
Mm,
not as successful as the years 1985 to 1987. The post-crisis boom and the post-Legends boom of DC was fantastic,
mm,
which allowed them the opportunity to give us things like Checkmate, which only was up to issue 4 by the time this issue came out, to do weird miniseries like Silver Blade, to give Spectre his own book. They got rid of war comics and horror comics so they could like squeeze in other things. Spectre was up to 15 by this point. Um, Power Girl had a mini series at this point. I think we were coming up on Power of the Atom pretty soon. Manhunter started a title, issue number 1, the same month as this issue. Crimson Avenger had a mini series. So like these are not A list, B list, right? They're C, D going down. And I think that's why with the success of Legion, they're like, yeah, let's do this book. Let's see what happens, you know. Um,
But it's interesting that they didn't do a miniseries to test it out, as opposed to launching it an ongoing.
I think at this point they're in. DC is in. Like they're like I said, they're writing. You know, Batman: The Killing Joke came out this month. Um, Green Arrow had just started with Mike Grell. That's up to issue 6. Question is up to issue 17, which was a fantastic series. I think they're like trying to find the next thing. Suicide Squad's up to issue
Mm.
14. That was a
Hmm.
killer series at the time. So I don't think it. I think it actually makes sense that they would just try to recapture the Legion of Superheroes. Plus, it's Doug Munch, right? Like as you said, which Doug Munch are we getting, right? This is Doug Munch who was writing Spectre, was writing Electric Warrior, Lords of the Ultra Realm, and previous to that was writing Batman and Detective, right? So they're like, okay, we think he is going to do well, right? So and maybe they're hoping that he can steer that ship, steer all these newbies into an interesting story, um, which is really probably only going to be interesting to me because, as I said, of the whole control. I totally forgot or never knew that the controller was involved in this. Plus, having read the first appearance for our last issue and how when they introduced the Wanderers, you barely knew any of them before you got them in the meat of the story. And in this one, yes, we spend way too long in that training room, but then it's like, okay, well, at least we actually get something. We get to see what they do, how their powers have changed, or or maybe they haven't changed. Um, so all of that stuff, I think I like it from a DC continuity level more than I do as a comic book reader,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Yeah. Because for me, the whole control. So Eric mentioned the premise. Basically, there's a dire threat. This controller named Clonus has been looking for the Wanderers. He finds them. They're dead, and he realizes that the threat that he's looking for killed them. So he decides to clone them in order to help. And as you mentioned, maybe give them a little boost in their powers. Meanwhile, he has a clone himself take care of this while he goes off and does and continues the search. So the second clone says, find them, meaning I assume the big bad, find her, and we don't know who that means. 3 years pass, and then these new clones of the Wanderers develop and grow to the age of 18. Um, they call their original bodies the prime bodies. One of the Wanderers doesn't survive the process, so instead of 7, there are now 6. That original controller comes back. He dies. He basically is, mortally injured. And all these other controllers or at least one other one, are on the way because what he's doing is illegal. So where he comes from, cloning, who knew the controllers actually had any morals? But cloning is not allowed, and even this controller was considered to be higher functioning than other controllers, which of course in comics puts him in the outskirts of society. That's why he came to our reality and messes around with cloning to the point that he creates the very creatures that are going after him, which is such a controller thing to do.
Hmm.
They're the ones who created the Sun Eaters. They're the ones who create big evil things that bite him in the ass, So I love that little twist. I don't know why I didn't see it coming, although when you see the monster design early on, I'm like, oh, it looks like a controller. I was like, yeah, he's got the gem on the forehead and whatever. So when you get to that twist, you're like, oh yeah, okay, makes sense. And then because the Wanderers are clones, the other controllers consider them illegal. So now they have to be on the run, which just goes back to the name Wanderers. They have to wander, they have to they have to run, or they will, because they're always, you have to give them a reason to be called Wanderers, and that's a good reason, they're,
Yeah.
you know. So all of those things, I was like, I'm in. I'm in. Now it's a question of where do we go
Execution.
off the cliff, Because I know it's coming. I know the cliff is coming. But and as I mentioned, there's absolutely nothing in the book that puts it in the Legion context other than if you know the characters and just because the book says it's Legion of Superheroes. Where's could you give me a mention of a name of a planet or the Legion itself?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I wrote here, it's dated, the dialogue is dated, the narrative stuff is great. It's a bit rocky. I think there's some promise and potential. Like if I read this and New Guardians and Manhunter 1 and Mike Grell's Green Arrow 1 and Young All Stars 1, this would not be the top, but it wouldn't be the bottom either. So,
Okay. Well, I'm intrigued by what could come out of this first issue, the setup.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, it really just are, are we going to get some, you know, situations and dialogue that are just typical, I guess.
right. More of
Typical
the
of that
same.
time, like you said. Yeah,
Yeah,
more of the same of what
yeah,
we see here. I have to say, given all of the characters, so we got Psyche, Elvar, Quantum Queen, Aviax, Reanimage, that's a horrible name,
yeah,
and Dardalon. Uh, I really didn't care about any of them. I was more interested in the controller stuff
yeah,
that
yeah.
we saw at the beginning of the issue.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, although, Dr. Clonus, little little
Little on
too
the
on the
nose.
nose. Jeez.
Yeah,
It's just come on.
yeah.
So yeah. Uh, yeah, it'd be interesting to see where this goes. I know this only goes to 13 issues though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's
So,
going to get
yeah.
weirder and weirder as we go. I know that.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, I did like the fact that some of the characters were okay with what happened and others were not.
Yeah. Hmm.
That makes sense. And if he's going to lay into that, great. That makes it interesting. Um, and then you have to find a purpose. What was their purpose in that original first appearance? We don't know. They were just another team that the Legion met that had powers that were sort of interesting and sort of not.
Hmm.
Some were basic, some were not basic. So what do you do with them? Just make them new. And like I will say, like that splash page, when I turned to that splash and they're all just there dead, I was like, oh, even though I knew this, I know the story. I know that they get cloned. I was like, oh wow, they're really dead. And then this controller who was like saying things like, the only real treasure is life. This is after he hits the gravity button and all those dead bodies just fall all over the place. I was like,
Yeah.
boy, he really is a controller through and through,
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Well, they're dead.
Oh, I was just hearing these bodies just like thunk, 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 thunk. Like it was cool to see them in their original costumes floating there dead. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, like I said, not going to defend the issue. If you don't like it, yep, I know. It becomes a question of how do we treat this? Do we just keep reading issue to issue? Do we sum it all up in a tales? But like, is that
Mm.
going to be too much? Like if we just, is it 12-ish, 13 issues of us just going, oh my God, kind of like Bendis's Legion,
Yeah,
like where we
right.
just
Yep.
sort of struggle through to what can we talk about? So we can talk about that, how we want to present it.
Okay.
Um, One historical fact, new format. This is in DC's new format.
Yeah, you when you were listing a bunch of those titles previous, I'm like, wait, that was a new format thing. This is a
Yep.
new format.
Yep.
That was the other one was a new format. So yeah, go ahead.
So new format was meant to be in between Baxter and newsprint. So the Baxter line we're familiar with, that's what the Legion volume that we're reading is, New Teen Titans, Question, Infinity Inc. Those are all Baxter books. Somebody, DC Marvel or an independent, eventually came across Mando paper, which is in between Baxter and newsprint, slightly better than newsprint, a little bit whiter. I think the new format, though, is a different version of Mando. I think I read somewhere that it's like a thinner version of Mando. I don't know. I don't know if this is exactly Mando or Mando-esque. But what I do know is the first time I remember coming across it was Spectre #1 from January of 1987, and all those books were $1. So the normal line was 75, Baxter was 150, and this new format was $1. At the time of The Wanderers, new format is $1.25. There are still some 75-cent regular issues. There's some dollar regular issues. Baxter is up to like $1.75 by this point. So I think Spectre #1 was the first new format book, and then you would get other ones, as I mentioned. At the time of The Wanderers, Checkmate, Forever People, Flash Gordon, Mike Grell, Hellblazer was new format. Martian Manhunter, Phantom, Silverblade, Swamp Thing eventually turned into new format, Young All-Stars, and then there might be more after that as well. So DC is referring to their Baxter line as Deluxe, and as this new format line as new format, obviously. So I like that. I like that little bit of. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I remember when new format came out. It was just probably their way just to charge an extra 25 cents.
Or not charge you a little more for something, especially
That's
given
true.
this is a new this is perfect for well, I guess perfect would have been just your standard line of paper stock
Hmm.
because you could charge less for people to try it out
Yeah.
if they wanted, but they wanted to. I think they wanted to have what's the word? Is it patina of something more than the usual. I don't know.
Yeah. And it was 24 issues. I mean, 24 pages, slightly over.
Is that why it's $1.25?
No. I mean, this was, like I said, this was, I don't, no, I think by this point they just were $1.25.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can hash it out. If you don't want to read on, or I'll read on and I can give my thoughts,
Well,
we
like I
have to
said,
figure out how we're going to cover it.
I bought the issues, so I'm going to read them. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of how do you want to cover them? So,
I found more issues at Baltimore, so I'm going to try to find the other ones as well. Yeah, we'll figure it out. If we just want to give it a mention each episode, like we do with other things, we can do that. Might be best just to get it out of the way so we're not like suffering through 13 issues. And just to see if they do actually, have any connection to the Legion, that would be great.
I mean, why? Yeah, exactly. Why? I mean, I get the first issue, right? You got to do the setup, but eventually you got to have a crossover.
Yeah, you would think.
You would think.
Even Vigilante had Cyborg in issue #3 when that,
Hmm.
he got his own series. Well, thank you for indulging me.
Well, I was looking forward to it because like, oh yeah, finally I can go back and read this first issue and then read the rest and just experience a new corner of the 30th century.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but so hopefully it gets better.
All right. Shall we go to Who's Who?
Yes,
All right, lead us into this.
cleanse the palate. Sorry. I'm really grumpy today, I think. Complaining, complaining. So who's who in the Legion of Superheroes number three? Do you want me to just announce the entries and why?
Sure.
So while I said last time that I came up with a connection, a reason for these, I did so again today, or for this episode, for this issue, um, and I felt I was kind of clever at this a little bit.
Hmm.
Maybe less so on this one than the other one. Anyway, so we're going to talk about the heroes of Lalor, the Kunz, and Invisible Kid 1. And I chose these. I was actually going to choose some different ones, Peter.
Hmm.
But then I would realize, oh, wait, all of these locations that are talked about at the beginning of the issue have relation to these particular entries.
Hmm.
For because Lalor is talked about, Kundia is talked about, and Shanghala is talked about
Oh,
in
yeah.
this issue. So
Very cool.
why not? Why not
Yeah.
talk about those characters? It gave me an opportunity to kind of read a few things with Invisible Kid that I didn't know about or didn't have a lot of details about. So
And Eric's mentioning that every issue of Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes so far has an opening sequence. Again, this one is narrated through like a media lens. And this one is talking about the worlds of the Legion.
didn't we get a Legion Worlds miniseries years
Yes,
later?
years
Yeah.
later. Hmm.
That's one of the things I don't have in my collection.
Arid's otherworldly tour of interesting places and fascinating stories. So this is Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes issue 3, which came out also in March of '88 under a cover by LaRocque and Carl Kiesel. Do you want to talk about the entries? Do you want to talk about the worlds? What do you want to talk about first?
Well, so I actually didn't have a whole lot to say about the worlds.
Neither did I.
Because it's really just kind of regurgitating information that we already knew about them. But I found it interesting when you get to page 2 and 3, where they're talking about the Dominion, Cthulhu, Kundia, and Korbal.
Hmm.
Really, it's just those latter three. Cthulhu and Kundia and Korbal. Well, Cthulhu and Kundia are talked about being perpetually dark.
Hmm.
And then Korbal is shown that way because, they got to show lightning in a interesting way. But I thought, well, that's interesting that all of these, there's this commonality here with some of these entries that I found interesting. And then you get the explicit comparison between Kundia and how did you say that?
Lethal?
Lethal. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Hmm.
And how Lethal is like Kundia, but not. But they had what did they say here? Oh, there's a bit of humor, a touch of compassion involved with the people on Lethal. I'm like, okay. But I just doing the direct comparisons between these worlds. The Dominion. There's some similarities between the Dominion and Kundia. How they're, the Dominion had a war with a neighboring planet, and that planet still rains down on them. And Kundia is all about using up all their resources to build up their empire. Right? They're the Klingons of the Legion world.
Yeah.
I guess the Dominion would be more like the oh my God, Romulans,
Hmm.
in a sense. So anyway, I like that. I like being able to having them all together like this did lead to a little bit of comparison that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I was also glad to see that, like, Korbal has a science police station there, to prevent people from trying to get lightning powers like Lightning Lad and Lass and whatnot. So
Yeah, all the descriptions are like extended versions of what Levitz used to write with like the Encyclopedia Galactica or
yes,
some,
exactly.
your 30th century tour guide or, you know, Metropolis on five credits, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
this
why
is
it's interesting, but there's not really much else to learn. I mean,
right.
there's some things like Cthulhu. They're like, it's a great honeymoon spot, but they're conservative, so there's no gambling and things like that. But it's like, well, okay, that's interesting, but it doesn't play into story really.
Or like Shanghala, where they write, no one knows who placed the first memorial.
Hmm.
Some of this, again, okay, so this is Huzu and the Legion of Superheroes, and we're getting a tour through their universe of some major locations, some very minor locations. Wouldn't it have been great if the Wanderers actually had one of the planets in it so that you could then go to the Who's Who that also came out that month and go, oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. My biggest takeaway is Keith Giffen breaking down all of these locations. Yeah, Planets of the 30th Century, Keith Giffen and Bob Smith. They all feel like really great panels that set where you are. Like when you're reading a comic, Perez was great at it, Giffen was great at it.
Yeah.
And it all feels like he's just testing waters for 5 years later. Like,
Yeah.
like the Cthulhu, especially the way the buildings are all like encased in the rock. RJ Brand's asteroid planet, Lalor to a degree. Even the way he showcases Shanghala, that is not the way we usually see that asteroid from that point of view.
Right.
It just feels like, oh yeah, this is what he does in 5 years later a lot too. Like when you look at locations, you don't actually see everything. You just see just enough to kind of go, this architecture is different than this planet, or the foliage is different here than elsewhere. Um, so that's what I get out of that. I'm like,
Hmm.
ooh, he's coming. He's coming back to the book, baby. I can't wait. Cannot wait.
Yeah.
And by the way, we are recording this, what, a year after he passed, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I think he passed on October 9th, I think it is.
Hmm.
Yes. So this is it's October 20th. So any chance to, give our love to Keith Giffen, I'm all for it. So, all right. Heroes of Lalor, Invisible Kid 1, The Coons. What did you learn?
Wait. Before we
Oh,
go there,
sorry. Go ahead.
sorry. Takron Galtos. I thought
Yes.
you might say something about this, but they talk about the how it was destroyed by a wave of antimatter.
Hmm.
Going back to the Crisis tie-in. But then it says also something about the mass carnage caused by the antimatter crisis.
Yes.
Like how they're playing with that. So anyway,
Yeah.
all right. Heroes of Lalor because of Lalor. So this. Okay. Given that we just talked about the Wanderers, which group would you rather have had a comic book about?
Um, yeah. I'd probably give it to the Wanderers.
Really?
Yeah, I never liked the Heroes of Lalor. They don't do anything.
Well, yeah, but the Wanderers didn't either.
That's true.
I would prefer the Heroes of Lalor. You've
I mean,
got
their backstory is fascinating. The whole nuclear thing, and then there's a dictator, and they're mutants and
hmm.
raised together. Like all that stuff is fascinating, and the hint of Duplicate Boy being the most powerful, could be potentially the most powerful person in the whole galaxy if he actually got off his ass. So
Right.
um, yeah, there is some interesting stuff there to mess around with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Life Lass is basically Quizlet,
Hmm. Hmm.
except maybe more. I don't know. Gas Girl, that's just a stupid name, but the way that they describe her in here, she's a bit of a show off. She enjoys the favorable publicity the group now earns, although Duplicate Boy remains the media's darling and gets the bulk of the attention. So there's just a lot of interpersonal interactions that, are built into this team that could
Hmm.
be interesting to play out on the page. So I don't know. I at the very least I would like them to do more with these characters just to give them a little bit more than just what their powers are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're confined to their home, like it says, confined to their home unless there's a galactic threat, which is basically shorthand for, oh yeah, we see them in cameos.
Yeah, why limit a team like that? But that's easily worked around, right? And
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
also have the situation with Beast Boy, who died
Hmm.
after, essentially kind of going crazy a little bit, right? So they have that, what is that? That shame, I guess, of one of their own turning bad. I just, there's so many potential storyline possibilities here that I see that I don't see with Wanderers. So,
Well, and also like you can do things with them that, you know, life last that could be questionable, right? Like
yeah.
um Elv Evolvo Lad, if he's that far thinking, he's got to be an alien to us, you know? Like think of Brainiac 5 just tripled, quadrupled, whatever, and just could he even relate to humans anymore? And their their whole backstory could lead to conflict. And so
Mm,
on that
yes.
level, I could see it. I could see it like a group of heroes who are beholden to their world and then get tired of it, and then get branded as whatever, and then they're forced to wander the universe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, this was drawn by the group shot was drawn by Jim Valentino. It says Valentino. I have to imagine that's Jim Valentino
Yeah.
and George Perez on inking, except for Ivavo Lad and Life Last, who are drawn by Kurt Swan and John Beatty. And yes, this Beast Boy first appeared over a year before Gar Logan did in Doom Patrol number 99.
Duplicate Boy does not look like either of those artists to me in his own entry.
Looks like Kurt Swan.
Yeah. I think that maybe the credits are not quite there. Anyway, I found them interesting, especially compared to their counterparts, the Wanderers.
Right. Okay.
All right, Invisible Kid
Mm-hmm.
next for Shanghala
By Kurt
by Kurt.
Swan and
Yep.
Ty Templeton.
Mm-hmm.
Giving an odd John Byrne look. In fact, when I saw the image, I was like, "Oh, is that John Byrne?" Oh no, it's not.
Mm.
It's the face, that square. The Byrne does that kind of face structure.
This Invisible Kid, Lyle Norg.
He's one of
I've
your
read.
favorite characters, isn't it? No.
Well, no.
Oh no, no. Okay, I don't know why I thought he was.
I think he's probably one of the more not underused, yes, but what's maybe I can't remember. I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. But I think he has had a lot of potential that they never tapped into.
He's got the Barry Allen thing going. He's more interesting after he's
Dead.
dead. It's
Yeah.
true.
Hmm.
They write the more interesting stuff years after he has passed away.
That is true.
Even in this origin here in the Who's Who, which is much different than Who's Who Volume One. Um, and
Mm.
he was a leading player in the Legionnaires in the reboot. Like they made him more of an A-list character
Okay.
because of his smarts and all of that.
Well, I look forward to reading that when I get to it
Yeah.
as well. Uh, I thought it was interesting. The little details, right? He graduated from Metropolis U at age 8.
Hmm.
8? That's how smart he is?
That's the 30th century.
I know, but it's just like again, untapped potential for this character, right? Um, Hard time relating to others. Well, I that kind of goes hand in hand with being super smart like that,
Hmm.
I think. But the thing that got me to go back and read earlier issues is the whole thing with Mila, the ghost girl he fell in love with and supposedly joined with after he died?
Yeah.
Question mark. But this the Ghost Girl thing happened in Superboy. Oh no, is it 201 where he died? Anyway, it was around that time frame when this situation with Mila goes on. So I mean that was probably the first interesting story pre-death that I've read with him.
Right.
Otherwise, he was just the guy that turned invisible, and yeah, he was smart.
I do like what they say here, and it's almost touching on sort of like what they do with Valor later. His field of expertise was biological mutation. In his search to discover the cause of disadvantageous mutations in colony-raised Terrans, he isolated the genes governing specific mutations and developed a serum to selectively activate those genes. Is he messing with... I'm not quite sure what they mean by...
It's the disadvantageous part that throws me
Is it
because
is it like, oh, they're on a fire planet, but they have ice powers, or like, is it that? I don't think that seems like that would be that was why they went
advantageous,
to the
right?
fire. Yeah, that's why they went to the
Yeah,
fire. Yeah, so I'm a
I
little
don't know.
confused by that. But it seemed like something like genetic seeding, or
Mm-hmm.
is he trying to, maybe he's talking about that sort of evolutionary thing. So it's not quite Valor because this is 1,000 years later, but I don't know, something about all of that was just interesting to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved for them to tap that kind of stuff later.
Well, and the whole idea of, I mean, just the idea of him doing that research so that he can develop a serum that taps into his genetic capabilities to turn invisible, which
Yeah,
before it was just, oh, I develop a serum that I can make myself invisible.
right.
So this makes a lot more science seems to be the undercurrent of this episode, Peter. This makes a whole lot more sense in that in that explanation. So yeah, that's really cool. See, if they'd done stuff like that, that'd be I wouldn't have minded to have him around instead of Jacques, who doesn't do much except turn invisible these days.
Yeah, really.
And unfortunately, the Kunz entry, well, beautifully illustrated here, I believe by Giffen, right?
The Roke.
Oh, it is the Roke.
Hmm.
Holy crap!
The Roke and Robert Campanella.
Wow, I think he's doing his best Giffen though on on here.
Hmm.
That's amazing. Uh, it also interesting that the Kunz are shown different skin types, different color of skin, right? Which matches the various stories I've seen over the years,
Yeah.
where they seem to be this race and that race, and so it's like, well, that's cool that they finally acknowledge this, that they're different. They don't all look alike, which is typical of alien
Hmm.
cultures, even in the Legion, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was neat. Um, they talked about the location entry. They talked about how the whole culture is built around combat and defeat of enemies and whatnot, and you will get thrown into a like with Klingons, it's all about honor and whatnot, but they're more like well, no, yeah, they are like the Klingons of what we see from Next Gen, where honor is this paramount thing, and so you get thrown into those combat things,
Challenge
arenas,
courts.
yeah, challenge courts. Thank you. So, which I think is what was that issue, Peter? Karlak, issue 285.
Hmm.
So I think that's when at least that was my first exposure to that at that time, I think, new aspect of their culture.
Mm.
And and that was my first, I think, my first introduction to the Kunz, because I read the earlier stuff later than that.
Oh, right. I like when they're the cyborgy looking
Yeah.
types. That just makes sense if they're a warrior race.
Well, yeah, and the picture that we see, I think the robed guy he's more like a functionary, an ambassador or something like that, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
the middle guy is like he's the general, who commands the troops of the cyborg folks. You know,
Yeah.
probably the poor, or the not as influential uh, people on the planet.
Yeah, they're the aliens you love to beat up on.
Well, and I will on that I'll say too. We got was it the previous issue where Mon-El basically
Yep.
starts an interstellar war in the way that he attacks the Kuns? But it's like they just they've become a bit of a joke in Legion stories, I think, to
Yeah.
this point, and that's too bad because they could be a really interesting adversary to them in various ways, given that they've had these years, these decades of the interactions they've had with different personalities throughout the years.
Right. Right.
Why not play that up? There's a lot of potential political intrigue there and military opposition, and although when you have a guy who can push a white dwarf star around, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
That's all I had on these entries.
We will continue to look through who's who in the Legion of Superheroes. We'll continue to select entries. By the way, listeners, next month with issue 49, episode 49, another Who's Who, regular Who's Who volume begins. So we'll have to look for Legion entries in that one as well. So slowly but surely we'll get through everything.
Did Mark Waid edit that one too?
I would assume so.
I was like, he must have been going crazy at that time, or loving it.
Or loving it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would love it. All right, so let's wrap up our look at Legion or Legion adjacent stories again during this time of March 1988. We've been following the adventures of this mysterious Supergirl, and we are now at Superman issue number 19 and Adventures of Superman issue 442, both of which have just one page dealing with Supergirl. Superman number 19 is by John Byrne, Petrus Cotis, John Costanza, and inker John Beatty. And Adventures of Superman is John Byrne and Jerry Ordway scripting and co-plotting, Ordway on pencils, Andy Kubert inking, Albert de Guzman lettering, Anthony Tollin colorist, and Mr. Mike Carlin is your editor for both. She had been found in the Antarctic, dressed as Supergirl by some scientists waiting for her to wake up. She woke up the last time we saw her, and that leads us to Superman 19, one pager. So, any thoughts on that?
They changed her costume. She has pants, leggings, I should say.
Yeah, are you reading it on the app?
Yes, I am actually. Is
Yeah.
it different?
Well, I'm wondering if it's different because it's
Ah,
obviously, freshened up and, I don't remember what the original copy looked because she has been the Adventures of Superman. She don't have pants.
right, exactly. And that came out obviously later than
Yeah,
this,
so it's
or at
either
least story-wise it is.
I don't know if it's a coloring mistake in the original issue or
Yeah,
a coloring mistake in this new updated DC app version.
I'll have to go because I have this issue in my collection. I have to go
Okay.
check this out. But that was the first thing that struck me. Wait a minute, she's got blue pants now.
Well, plus in the Superman 19 the in the app she has that sort of orange-ish hair, right?
That's true.
But in Adventures of Superman, it's yellow,
Yeah.
and at least in the original. So it should be orange. It should be an orangey. From what we are going to eventually learn, it should have an orange tint to it.
Right.
So I don't like that they're playing, they're messing that up.
Mm,
It's like,
mm.
stop with the, you're trying to create a narrative here and you're messing it up. Come on.
But in the Superman issue, she's leaving. I have a mission, she says. If I could only remember what it is, I must head north to America, to
North,
Smallville.
Miss Tessmacher.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too. Uh, oh yeah, she's in Antarctica, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
north to Smallville. Okay, which leads us to adventures.
yeah. I'm just looking back. So in Superman 16, the app has her as blonde. Ugh, stop putting her in blonde. She's not supposed to
What?
be blonde.
What? Peter, she's Supergirl. What?
I know, but
Come on.
the narrative is ruined. The narrative, ruining it. Yeah. So then leading to adventure.
Before we even get into the content here, this is one of those things where, like, you have scenes of people who are traveling, right?
Hmm.
Um, presumably this is a long distance for her, regardless of her superpowers, but because she says, "At last," I was beginning to think I would never get here. It was so far to fly. So she's not super duper fast with flying.
Hmm.
So that's it. That's an interesting point. However, um, she she had all this time to think about stuff, and it's only now that she's landed that she's starting to recall things. Maybe it's just because of the location. I think that's probably the implication there. But
Okay.
I see this all the time where people are like, they when they get to their destination, then they have the conversation that they probably would have had normally while they were traveling,
Right.
or self-reflection or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Makes sense.
pet peeve of mine.
And again, not much to it. We know where this is leading. Um, these are just teases. There's not much more to say about it than that they are teases.
Oh, but
Um,
this one does give us a little bit. It's like, she is remembering
true.
some details, right? And
Yeah.
someone is saying, don't worry, I've worked out everything to the last detail. But Lex, if this should go wrong, if we should be found out, so there's like, oh, Lex, what's Lex Luthor up to, right?
Right.
But so that's interesting. Oh, it's another clone thing, or it's a decoy or a robot or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, so had I been reading this at that time, I would have been trying to think of the possibilities. What, but why she, but it says, oh yeah, it continues on. You have only to trust me. Trust me, and this plan will take you to Superman. But what does that mean?
Hmm.
Boy, and talk about trust. You have only to trust me. And given what we talked about earlier about the duo damsel and feeling like she's lying to the team, and just the whole conspiracy, and the trust that may be broken within the Legion. That's interesting, interesting through line.
Yeah. So Eric and I decided what we're going to do is we have one more of these sort of like teases, and then we get to the Supergirl saga story, which is 3 chapters. We would normally put it in a regular episode, but that would start with issue 50, and issue 50 is already going to be giant. So what we're going to do is we're going to save the Supergirl saga for a Tales episode, because there's probably going to be a lot to talk about with like the whole where she comes from, how it connects to the Legion, how it connects to the last time we were at this particular location, and um, you know, it's really going to be Legion adjacent, but that's okay. I'm looking forward to it because it's been a while since I've read those 3 issues, and it'll be fun just to kind of not have to worry about, oh, we only have like 5 minutes to talk about it. Like let's see
Yeah,
what comes out of the conversation.
yeah,
So,
okay.
so that'll be after issue 50. We'll do that after episode 50. Might even be the first Tales after that.
Hmm.
I have some plans that I'll throw Eric's way.
I love this. I love this part of the job.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that DC All In special, or do you want to just save it for later once you've read it all? This is what we teased at the beginning of the episode of.
Well, if we teased it, we gotta.
Okay,
It's
we'll
like
mention it.
Chekhov's gun, right? So
We're talking about the DC All In special that came out the first week of October, giving us a new Justice League Unlimited, giving us a new status quo for Darkseid, creating a whole new line with the DC Universe called the Absolute line. It was a flip book. Scott Snyder, Joshua Williamson, Danielle Sampere, um, Wes Craig, and it's a way to start a new thematic jumping on point for the DC universe. All their titles are now being branded with DC All In. We got the DC Bullet back as the logo. So this flip book telling two different stories leading to the middle gave us a center spread of this new universe that Darkseid is controlling, this new alternate universe. And he has an army, and that army just so happens to be who?
A legion.
A legion of superheroes. We don't know which legion. I'm kind of assuming it's the Legion of Superheroes from that particular universe. If there's a Batman, a
Well,
Superman, a Wonder Woman, there's going to be a Flash. There's going to be a Green Lantern. There's going to be a Martian Manhunter. So, okay, then does that mean there's a Legion there too?
well, and Darkseid does say in that spread, my legion.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and I have not read at the time of this recording. I've not read the DC All In special, but Peter did supply that image showing the Legion. I'm like, oh my God, this is so fascinating.
Yeah. As drawn by Dan Mora, I have to assume by designed by Dan Mora as well. He seems to be capable of just doing bang up designs very
Yeah.
quickly.
hmm And some of these are like I told Peter before we started recording. I mean, Chameleon Boy looks really awesome, and Brainiac. I assume that's Brainiac 5. Is like, wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
uh, reminiscent, sort of the animated
Mm-hmm.
version of him, but different. This is yeah. I'm having a hard time not being absorbed into the picture.
Yeah. I mean, on some
So
level,
cool.
some of them almost look like adult Legion designs.
hmm
Some Chameleon Boy almost looks like his animated version.
Well, and they all have the Omega symbol
Yes.
incorporated onto their costumes,
Yes.
and they're not all the same. So that to signify dark side.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. They're mostly, especially the ones that we're most familiar with for our Legion. You know what I refer to as our Legion. They
Yeah.
do look older. I assume that's Lightning Lad. Yeah, with the red hair, he's got a beard and mustache, and looks like a scar running
Mm-hmm.
up his face. But then you have people like that's Kid Quantum, right? From the reboot Legion.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
You know, looking a bit younger, or about the same age as she was in that, from what I recall. But yeah, yeah, an older Legion. Definitely, Colossal Boy looks pretty grim. Lightning Lad looks really angry. Do not mess with Shrinking Violet down in the lower right corner because she will just chop your legs off based on that face.
Look at Element Lad. His design, his chest emblem
hmm
looks like the Mark Wade version, the Barry
Yeah.
Kitson.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's like incorporating all these little elements, not direct or specific elements
Yeah.
necessarily. So yeah, that's fascinating to me. The design choices they made, or just the character choices they've made on this.
Yeah. Saturn Girl, Timberwolf, Phantom Girl, Starman. There's your boy,
hmm I
Ultra
like
Boy,
that. I like that version of his costume too.
Shadow Lass, Feral Lad, looking like an Iron Man-esque, looking like War Machine.
Yes. Wow. Yeah.
Did we say Cosmic Boy? And Triplicate Girl is there in the background as well.
hmm
And the whole image just gives me Great Darkness Saga cover
hmm
imagery, like one of the covers they did for the trades.
And why these Legionnaires? Because we're missing some.
Yeah.
That's just interesting. And are they going to be playing with these characters in the Absolute line or some other thing that's coming that we don't know
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, it really just depends on where Booster, because Booster Gold is our point man on that. He arrives in this universe at this particular moment, and then the Legion are there. But we don't know yet if where he arrives is the same time as when the Absolute Books takes place. He keeps saying, "Oh, I know when I am." So I'm thinking he might have gone to a future, maybe. I even speculated that I think this is DC's way of bringing back the Great Disaster from Commandy.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I don't know, a lot of questions. I just think it's very interesting that Scott Snyder, Josh Williamson, DC, they're like, oh, okay, here's DC All In. We're going to give you all these new books, new jumping on points. Hey, we're going to give you a Black Lightning title, a Metamorpho title. Oh, you're wondering where the Legion is? Here they are, but they're not going to be. We know, we've been messing with them. We know the last thing didn't work. We know you don't want another reboot. They have showed up in another title.
Hmm.
But okay, you want a version? Okay, we're gonna spin that right on its head and give you a version you didn't expect.
Oh, okay. So what do you think about that potential version?
This version here,
Yeah.
um, who knows? Who knows?
Well, or just the idea of a, quote unquote evil legion
Yeah,
or dark legion or whatever.
it makes sense. There's history there.
Oh, and that's another thing I was loving about this was, given the Great Darkness saga, and now it's hard to say with all the reboots and whatnot,
Right,
but apparently everything's all in, right?
right.
Uh, so Darkseid was defeated by the Legion. This is his revenge by co-opting
Well,
them, maybe? No?
was he defeated or did he?
Well, yeah.
You know,
It was
I
more
know
like
what you're saying.
he got frustrated with a bunch of
Yeah,
these teenagers and just left. All right, you
yeah.
guys suck. I'm leaving. But yeah, but still, it's like, what is yeah this? I mean, this is very exciting to me because what is the connection to the Great Darkness saga and why these Legionnaires? And they look different from the Legion that we saw in Justice Society. And what does this mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the kind of stuff that does get me excited about these these lineup changes that DC does or Marvel does or whatever. But
Hmm.
things like this is like playing around with our expectations, and even though nobody wants to see their favorite one of their favorite superhero groups be all evil and dark and stuff, at least not for the status quo of those characters going
Right,
forward. But
right.
so there's a lot of possibilities here, so
Yeah,
many possibilities. I love
because
it.
the whole Absolute line, apparently, the premise is that it's built on dark side energy. So could DC finally say, you know what, we're tired of doing a Legion of Superheroes title that just doesn't work. Let's do a Legion of Supervillains. Let's make
Oh
them
my
villains.
God.
And then then we can do whatever the heck we want. And then maybe it's a way to maybe this version has to find them a way to
Yeah,
become the Legion of Superheroes.
exactly. I was thinking the same thing. Oh my God, give me that book now. And have Dan Mora draw it.
Can he just draw the entire DC universe
Yeah,
longer?
right.
Yeah. Dan Mora, Jorge Jimenez, Danielle Simper.
Oh, that would be nice too.
There's a lot of great artists at DC. All Spanish or Latino or South American. So yeah, interesting. So if you're a Legion fan, there's two books you should be reading right now. DC All In, and do you know the other one?
It's not Justice Society?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you knew. I didn't want to spoil it if you did.
Yeah.
So read those two books, people. All right. I think we're talked out. It's a good episode. Lots to talk about. Meaty, a lot of meaty Legion talk.
Yes.
So
Good meaty Legion talk too this time. Feel like the last two issues, I should say, have been us kind of trying to get through
yeah.
them.
Well, let's give them a little tease. So next episode will be issue 49. We'll look at Legion of Superheroes 49. Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes issue number 4, Who's Who Update 88 issue 1, and a little bit of Superman 20. And then we can decide if we want to also do Wanderers number 2. So that's what we're looking forward to for next episode.
Cannot wait.
All right. Send us feedback, Peter at thedailyrios.com, or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
Eric, thank you as always.
Thank you, Peter. This was fun.
Yep. And as always,
long live
the
Legion Project Podcast.
See ya.
Bye-bye.